The gunshot echoed through the armory basement like thunder in a metal canyon. Blood sprayed across the wall in a crimson fan pattern decorating government-issue gray with the unmistakable signature of violent death. The intruder's body crumpled, folding at unnatural angles as it slumped to the concrete floor. When General Thomas Rayburn discovered the silver medal etched with 347 confirmed eliminations in Sarah Mitchell's personal locker, he knew this unassuming weapons technician was no ordinary soldier. She was the Ghost, the legendary Gulf War sniper who had vanished without a trace 12 years earlier. The most lethal American operative ever to look through a scope was hiding in plain sight, maintaining rifles instead of firing them. Fort Garrison, Texas, 2009. The sprawling military base hummed with the orchestrated chaos of preparation. In 48 hours, the Secretary of Defense would arrive with a delegation of Pentagon officials for a weapons demonstration that would determine the future of 3 defense contracts worth billions. Security protocols had been upgraded to Level 1. Every weapon was being inspected, every soldier vetted, every corner of the base scrutinized for vulnerabilities. No one paid particular attention to the woman working alone in the armory basement. Sarah Mitchell moved through the fluorescent-lit armory with the quiet efficiency of someone who preferred machines to people. At 38, she possessed the kind of unremarkable appearance that made people forget her minutes after walking away. Average height, brown hair pulled back in a regulation ponytail, and eyes that revealed nothing. Her personnel file listed 3 years of exemplary service as a weapons technician with prior experience vaguely described as logistical support in classified operations. The lie had worked perfectly until now. The basement armory was her sanctuary, a place of mechanical precision and predictable outcomes. Weapons didn't lie, didn't have hidden agendas, didn't make promises they couldn't keep. Each component had its purpose, its relationship to the whole system clearly defined and understood. Sarah found peace in their honesty. 3 floors above General Thomas Rayburn reviewed security protocols for the Secretary's visit. At 68, Rayburn was a living legend in military circles. Bronze Star in Vietnam, key architect of special operations during the Cold War, trusted advisor to 3 presidents. His weathered face bore the topography of a man who had made life-or-death decisions for decades, each line earned through sleepless nights and impossible choices. Most soldiers saw only the chest full of medals and ramrod posture. Few knew that Rayburn had personally overseen some of America's most classified operations against the Soviet Union, including the formation of specialized units that officially never existed. "General, we've completed the personnel security reviews," reported Major Wilson, sliding a folder across the desk. "Everyone checks out." Rayburn nodded absently. "And the Barrett M82, is it ready for the demonstration?" Wilson hesitated. "There's a minor issue, sir. The firing mechanism is jammed. Technical staff says it needs specialized attention." "Then get it fixed," Rayburn said, irritation evident. "That rifle is the centerpiece of tomorrow's demonstration." "Yes, sir. I've already sent Sergeant Reed to deliver it to our weapons specialist in the armory." Sergeant Jason Reed's boots announced his arrival long before he appeared at Sarah's workstation, the heavy footfalls of a man who wanted others to know he was coming. He dropped a long rifle case on her bench, with deliberate carelessness, the metallic thud echoing through the otherwise quiet armory. "Mitchell," Reed said, his voice carrying the practiced condescension he reserved for female personnel. "Got a Barrett M82 with a jammed firing mechanism. Needs to be operational by 0600 tomorrow for pre-demonstration checks." Sarah didn't look up from the M4 carbine she was reassembling. "Put it on the bench, Sergeant. I'll get to it next." Reed leaned against her workstation, invading her space. "This isn't just any rifle, Mitchell. It's the centerpiece of tomorrow's demonstration for the Secretary of Defense. 50 caliber anti-material capability, effective range beyond 1,500 meters." He spoke as if explaining basic concepts to a child. "Think you can handle something with a bit more kick than the standard issue?" Sarah finally looked up, her gray eyes meeting his with an expression that revealed nothing. "I'm familiar with the Barrett M82A1 Sergeant. Recoil-operated semi-automatic 10-round detachable magazine. The firing pin might be fractured, or there could be carbon buildup in the bolt carrier group. Either way, it'll be operational by morning." Reed's smirk faltered slightly. "Just make sure it works. The demonstration team needs perfection, not excuses." As Reed walked away, Sarah turned her attention to the rifle case. The Barrett M82 was, indeed, a formidable weapon. 50 pounds of precision-engineered steel and polymer capable of engaging targets at distances that bordered on the impossible for conventional marksmen. It was designed to penetrate light armor, disable vehicles, and destroy sensitive equipment at ranges where most shooters couldn't even see their targets clearly. Sarah knew the rifle intimately, though not in the way her personnel file would suggest. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Sarah cleared her workbench and prepared to assess the Barrett. Her movements were methodical, practiced to the point of unconscious precision. She opened the rifle case with reverence that would have seemed odd to anyone watching closely. The Barrett lay nestled in custom foam, padding its massive frame, designed for one purpose: reaching out across impossible distances to deliver lethal force with surgical precision. Sarah lifted it with practiced ease that belied its substantial weight, her hands finding natural positions that spoke to muscle memory far beyond what a typical armory technician should possess. She began disassembling the rifle with fluid movements that required no reference to technical manuals. Her fingers found each pin and lever without hesitation, separating the massive bolt carrier group buffer assembly and trigger mechanism with the confidence of someone who had performed these actions thousands of times. The jam became immediately apparent. Carbon buildup around the firing pin channel had created excessive friction, preventing proper function. But there was something else, something that made Sarah pause. The wear patterns on the bolt face showed evidence of recent use, extensive use, despite the rifle supposedly being in storage for months prior to the demonstration. And there was something else. Traces of fine reddish sand, not the tan variety found in Texas, but the distinctive silicate common to certain regions in Afghanistan. This rifle had seen combat recently, despite what the paperwork claimed. As she worked, Sarah's mind drifted involuntarily to another time, another place. Desert fatigues rough against sunburned skin. The weight of a similar rifle pressing into her shoulder. The distinctive smell of weapon oil mixed with the dry desert air. The rhythm of her heartbeat as she regulated her breathing, preparing for a shot that would end a life from nearly a mile away. Operation Desert Storm, 1990. The landscape of Iraq stretched before her, a desolate panorama viewed through the precision optics of a scope nearly identical to the one she now held in her hands. The crosshairs settled on a distant figure, a high-value target whose elimination would save countless American lives. Her finger caressed the trigger with lover's intimacy, the pressure building with exquisite control, until Sarah forced the memory away, focusing instead on the mechanical problem before her. The past was a minefield best left unexplored. She retrieved her personal cleaning kit, a compact leather case containing specialized tools she had accumulated over years of working with precision weapons. The kit had traveled with her through multiple duty stations, its contents carefully curated for maximum versatility. As she thumbed open the brass clasps, disaster struck. A silver medal tumbled out onto the workbench with the distinctive sound of metal against metal, a sound that seemed to echo with unnatural volume in the quiet armory. Sarah froze her blood, turning to ice as the medal came to rest face up on the steel surface. The silver finish reflected the harsh fluorescent lighting, revealing the engraving etched into its surface, 347 confirmed eliminations. Below the number was a small symbol that most people would never recognize, a crosshair with a single star at its center. The mark of Ghost Division, a unit that existed in budget line items and nowhere else, whose operations were buried so deep in classified files that most government officials didn't know they existed. Sarah's hand moved with preternatural speed, covering the medal before anyone could see it. But as she glanced up, she caught sight of Sergeant Reed, watching her from across the armory, his expression unreadable. Had he seen? Had anyone else? Sarah slipped the medal back into her kit, with movements that appeared casual, but were executed with the precision of someone who had spent years keeping deadly secrets. By the time Reed approached her workstation, she was focused on the Barrett's firing pin, her face showing nothing but professional concentration. "How's it coming along, Mitchell?" Reed asked, his voice carrying a new note of curiosity. "Just carbon buildup and some sand," Sarah replied without looking up. "Someone's been taking this rifle places it shouldn't go, but it'll be operational for the demonstration." Reed frowned. "According to the paperwork, that Barrett hasn't left the armory except for scheduled training. Then someone should explain how Afghan mountain sand got into the action," Sarah said, instantly regretting the specificity of her observation. A typical armory technician wouldn't recognize the origin of sand deposits with such certainty. Reed's eyes narrowed slightly. "You seem awfully sure about that assessment." Sarah shrugged, forcing casualness into the gesture. "You see enough weapons coming back from deployment, you learn to recognize the signs." Reed seemed about to say something else when his radio crackled to life, summoning him to the range. With a final lingering look at Sarah, he departed, leaving her alone with the disassembled rifle and the hidden medal that threatened to unravel the carefully constructed fiction of her identity. Unknown to Sarah, her secret was already compromised. Classified intelligence from Central Command had arrived that morning containing information that had set off alarm bells at the highest levels of Pentagon security. "The intelligence is confirmed, sir," reported Richard Carter, the CIA liaison assigned to Fort Garrison for the Secretary's visit. "The operative known as the Jackal has been spotted in Turkey communicating with sleeper agents across Europe and potentially the United States." General Rayburn studied the surveillance photos spread across his desk. The Jackal, though a former Soviet operative turned international terrorist, had been responsible for the assassination of 3 American ambassadors and the bombing of a Marine barracks in Lebanon that killed 42. His true identity remained unknown, his allegiance now, apparently, to the highest bidder. "What's his connection to this base?" Rayburn asked, his weathered fingers tracing the outline of the figure in the grainy photograph. "Signal intelligence intercepted communications referencing the American Ghost and Fort Garrison," Carter explained. "Analysis suggests he's targeting someone here, possibly someone connected to his past operations." Rayburn's expression remained impassive, but inwardly a cold realization was forming. The Ghost had been the operational codename for America's most lethal sniper during Desert Storm, an operative whose identity remained classified at the highest levels. If the Jackal was hunting the Ghost, it meant he had somehow discovered that the legendary sniper was stationed at Fort Garrison. "I need complete background checks on all personnel who transferred here in the last 5 years," Rayburn ordered. "Full spectrum, military records, civilian employment, educational history, everything." "Sir," Carter hesitated, "that's over 300 people. Then you better get started." Rayburn's tone left no room for argument. "And I want ballistics. on every documented jackal kill from the past decade. If he's planning an operation here, I want to know exactly what we're dealing with. Deep in the armory basement, Sarah continued her work on the Barrett, her movements now tinged with urgency. The metal's appearance had shattered her carefully maintained equilibrium, forcing unwelcome memories to the surface like bodies rising from a hastily dug grave. Project Artemis. The classified program, initiated during the Reagan administration to develop the world's most elite snipers. Operatives capable of eliminating high-value targets at ranges previously considered impossible. Sarah had been recruited at 21 of only 3 women among 32 candidates. By 23, she had outlasted them all, earning the code name that would eventually become legend, the Ghost. Her instructor, Colonel Frank Harmon, had been a Vietnam veteran with over 100 confirmed kills, an old-school warrior with piercing blue eyes who recognized in Sarah a natural talent that appeared once in a generation. Shooting isn't just about physics and formulas, he'd told her during their first training session. It's about intuition, understanding the space between heartbeats, feeling the wind before it touches your skin. Under Harmon's guidance, Sarah had developed skills that bordered on the supernatural. She could calculate bullet drop across a mile with instinctive precision, could read wind patterns like others read books, could remain motionless for hours, her heartbeat and breathing regulated to minimize even the slightest movement that might disturb a shot. By 1991, during Operation Desert Storm, she had accumulated a record that remained unmatched in American military history. 347 confirmed eliminations, each one documented and verified according to the stringent standards of Ghost Division. Her targets had been exclusively high value: terrorist leaders, Republican Guard commanders, weapons scientists, developing Saddam's chemical warfare program. Each elimination saved countless American lives. Each shot was authorized at the highest levels of government. But then came Baghdad, 1997, the shot that changed everything. Sarah had been deployed to eliminate a high-ranking member of a terrorist cell planning attacks against American embassies in the Middle East. The intelligence was deemed reliable. The authorization came directly from the Joint Chiefs. The shot itself was technically perfect, 1,430 meters, adjusting for a 12 Mahiyar crosswind through a partially open window on the 6th floor of a hotel. Only later did she learn the truth. Her target had been a British diplomat engaged in unauthorized peace negotiations. The intelligence had been deliberately falsified by someone within American intelligence circles, someone who wanted the negotiations to fail. Sarah had been the unwitting instrument of sabotage, her perfect shot ending not a terrorist's life, but a peacemaker's. The official record claimed mechanical failure of her rifle resulting in a missed shot. In reality, Sarah had hit exactly what she aimed at. She simply hadn't known what that was. When she discovered the truth, she made a decision that shocked her superiors. She walked away from Ghost Division, disappearing into the bureaucracy of the military system with the help of Colonel Harmon, who understood the psychological toll of what had happened. For 12 years, she had lived as Sarah Mitchell, weapons technician. No more blood on her hands. No more lives ended through her crosshairs. No more perfect shots that changed the course of history. Until now. The television in the armory break room was tuned to CNN when Sarah entered to retrieve coffee. The headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen froze her in place. International terrorist, the Jackal, believed to be operating on U.S. soil. Sarah stood transfixed as the reporter detailed intelligence reports suggesting the notorious assassin had entered the United States with falsified credentials. A grainy photograph showed a man with nondescript features boarding a flight in Istanbul. The coffee cup slipped from Sarah's fingers, shattering on the floor. The Jackal, the one target she had failed to eliminate. In 1995, she had been tasked with eliminating the former Soviet operative during a rare appearance in Sarajevo. For the first and only time in her career, she had missed. Equipment failure, they'd said. A sudden gust of wind. But Sarah knew better. She had hesitated, a momentary flinch triggered by the appearance of a child in her scope. By the time she recovered, the Jackal had moved the bullet, missing him by centimeters. It was the only failure in her operational history. And now he was here in America. "Mitchell, clean up that mess." The barked order snapped Sarah back to the present. Master Sergeant Phillips stood in the doorway, gesturing at the broken cup and spilled coffee. "Sorry, sir," Sarah mumbled, already moving to clean up the evidence of her momentary lapse. As she knelt to gather the ceramic shards, her mind raced. The Jackal's appearance couldn't be coincidence. If he was in the United States, if he had connections to Fort Garrison, as the news suggested, there could be only one explanation. He was hunting her. In the base's Secure Intelligence Center, Richard Carter examined the ballistics report with growing concern. The Jackal's signature was unmistakable. Custom-loaded 7.62mm rounds with a distinctive copper-tungsten core that left unique rifling marks. These weren't standard military or even black market munitions. They were custom-designed for a specific purpose to penetrate the specialized body armor worn by elite Western operatives. "He's hunting someone specific," Carter told General Rayburn. "Someone with high-level training, possibly special forces or intelligence." Rayburn studied the ballistics data with the practiced eye of someone who had spent decades evaluating threat assessments. "These rounds are designed to defeat Level 4 body armor at extended ranges. Our standard personnel wouldn't rate this level of specialized ammunition." "Sir," Carter said carefully, "I believe he may be targeting a current or former member of a specialized unit. Someone with the training and experience to recognize the threat he poses." Rayburn's expression remained impassive, but a subtle tension appeared around his eyes. "You're talking about a ghost hunt." "I am, sir. And if the Jackal is here, it means he believes he's found his ghost." The general rose from his chair, moving to the window that overlooked the sprawling base. Somewhere among the thousands of personnel, someone was being hunted by one of the world's deadliest assassins. "Compile a list of all personnel with special operations or intelligence backgrounds," Rayburn ordered. "Priority on snipers, counter-terrorism units, and anyone with operational experience in the Middle East during the 90s. "Yes, sir." Carter hesitated. "There's something else. The Jackal's rounds are specifically designed to counter the tactics used by one particular American unit, a unit whose existence has never been officially acknowledged." Rayburn turned slowly. "Ghost Division." "Yes, sir. He's hunting someone from Ghost Division." The general's weathered face hardened with resolve. "Then we need to find them first." By late afternoon, Sarah had restored the Barrett M82 to perfect working condition. The firing mechanism operated flawlessly, the action cycling with the smooth precision that came from proper maintenance and adjustment. She had also thoroughly cleaned any trace of foreign sand from the weapon, eliminating the evidence of its unauthorized deployment. As she completed the final function checks, Sarah became aware of footsteps approaching her workstation, heavier than Reed's, more deliberate. She looked up to find General Rayburn standing before her, his imposing presence filling the space with unspoken authority. "Specialist Mitchell," he said, his voice carrying the graveled texture of decades of command. "I understand you're handling the preparation of the Barrett for tomorrow's demonstration." Sarah rose to attention. "Yes, sir. Just completed the servicing. The rifle is fully operational." Rayburn nodded, his piercing blue eyes studying her with unsettling intensity. "I'd like to inspect your work if you don't mind. The Secretary of Defense has a particular interest in this weapon system. Of course, sir. Sarah stepped aside, allowing Rayburn access to the workbench. The general examined the rifle with the practiced hands of someone intimately familiar with its operation. He checked the bolt function, inspected the firing pin, and examined the trigger assembly with methodical precision. His actions weren't those of a general performing a routine inspection. They were the movements of an operator assessing a tool he had used in the field. "Excellent work, Mitchell," he said finally. "The action is smoother than factory specification." "Thank you, sir." Rayburn's gaze shifted from the rifle to Sarah's face, his expression unreadable. "Your file says you were in logistics before transferring to weapons maintenance. Where did you learn to service precision rifles with this level of expertise?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with unspoken implications. Sarah maintained her neutral expression through years of practiced discipline. "My father was a gunsmith, sir," she replied, the prepared cover story flowing naturally. "I grew up learning about firearms mechanics. The military just formalized what I already knew." "Interesting," Rayburn said, his tone suggesting he found it anything but. "And where was your father's shop located?" "Montana, sir. Small town called Whitehall." Rayburn nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "I knew a sniper from Montana once. Best natural shot I ever saw. Had an intuitive understanding of ballistics that couldn't be taught." He paused. "Strange coincidence." Sarah felt her pulse quicken, but kept her breathing steady. "The mountains create good shooting conditions, sir. Low humidity, consistent wind patterns. Makes for good practice." "Indeed." Rayburn turned his attention back to the rifle. "One more thing, Mitchell. Do you recognize this?" From his pocket, Rayburn produced a small object that caught the light. A silver medal identical to the one hidden in Sarah's cleaning kit. The same crosshair symbol, the same distinctive etching style. Sarah's years of operational discipline were all that prevented a visible reaction. Her face remained impassive, her breathing steady, but internally alarms screamed. Rayburn shouldn't have that medal. No one outside Ghost Division should even know such medals existed. "No, sir," she said, her voice steady. "I'm not familiar with that insignia." Rayburn studied her for a long moment, the silence stretching between them like a tripwire. "Curious," he said finally. "I thought you might be given your expertise with long-range precision systems." He returned the medal to his pocket. "The demonstration team will collect the Barrett at 0500 tomorrow. Ensure all documentation is completed before then." "Yes, sir." As Rayburn turned to leave, he paused. "One last question, Mitchell. Have you ever heard of an operative called the Ghost?" The question hit Sarah like a physical blow, but her expression revealed nothing. "Only rumors, sir. A sniper from Desert Storm, I believe. Most likely exaggerated for morale purposes." Rayburn's weathered face creased in what might have been a smile. "Most legends have some basis in fact, specialist. Remember that." As the general walked away, Sarah felt the carefully constructed walls of her new identity beginning to crack. Rayburn knew, or at least suspected. The appearance of the medal, the specific questions about her background, the direct reference to the Ghost. These weren't coincidences. For the first time in 12 years, someone had recognized the sniper behind the specialist's uniform. The question was, what would he do with that knowledge? As evening settled over Fort Garrison, the base transitioned to night operations. Floodlights illuminated the perimeter guards' rotated shifts, and the tempo of activity slowed to the measured rhythm of a military installation at rest. In the now empty armory, Sarah completed her final checks of the Barrett. The rifle rested in its case, perfectly maintained and ready for the next day's demonstration. She should have felt satisfaction in a job well done, but instead, a growing sense of unease prickled at the base of her neck. The same sensation that had kept her alive through dozens of high-risk operations. She was being watched. Sarah reached for her cleaning kit, her movements deliberately casual as her eyes scanned the shadows of the armory. The fluorescent lights created pools of harsh brightness, separated by areas of deep shadow, perfect concealment for someone trained in covert observation. As she packed her tools, Sarah's hand closed around the cold metal of a M9 Beretta pistol that technically shouldn't have been in her possession. The weapon had been her unauthorized insurance policy for 3 years, a final resort she'd hoped never to need. The sound came from behind her, so faint that only someone with her training would have detected it. The whisper of fabric against fabric. The subtle displacement of air that signaled movement. Sarah spun, drawing the Beretta in one fluid motion only to find General Rayburn standing in the doorway. His hands were raised slightly, showing he was unarmed. "Impressive reflexes, Mitchell," he said calmly. "Not standard for weapons maintenance personnel." Sarah lowered the pistol, but didn't holster it. "Force of habit, sir. Working alone at night makes one cautious." "Indeed." Rayburn stepped into the armory, his movements measured. "Though I suspect your caution predates your armory assignment. Sir, we need to talk Mitchell, or should I say, Ghost." The name hung in the air between them, dissolving the final pretense of Sarah's cover identity. For a moment, she considered maintaining the deception, but Rayburn's expression made it clear that denial would be pointless. "How long have you known?" she asked, her voice shifting subtly. The soft-spoken armory technician replaced by something harder, more precise. "I suspected since this morning," Rayburn replied. "The background check flagged inconsistencies in your service record. The medal confirmed it." He gestured to her cleaning kit. "The Ghost Division medal isn't something you leave to chance. Only 36 were ever awarded." "The 37 is," Sarah corrected automatically. "Colonel Harmon received the last one posthumously." Rayburn nodded. "Frank was a good man. He spoke highly of you." "You knew him." "I authorized the formation of Ghost Division in 1986, Rayburn said quietly. "Every operation, every target, every operative, including you." The revelation struck Sarah with physical force. Rayburn hadn't just recognized her. He had been the ultimate authority behind every trigger she'd ever pulled. The hand guiding the ghost. "Why are you here, sir?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. "Because you're in danger," Rayburn replied. "The Jackal is hunting Ghost Division operatives. 3 have been eliminated in the past year. Johnson in Ankara, Petrovich in Berlin, and Chen in Singapore. You're next on his list." Sarah absorbed this information with the cold calculation of an operator assessing threat parameters. "The Jackal failed to eliminate me once before. He won't get a second chance. This isn't about professional pride, Ghost. The Jackal isn't working alone. He's—" The base alarm system erupted with a wailing siren, cutting off Rayburn's words. Red emergency lights began flashing throughout the armory, bathing the space in a crimson glow that transformed the familiar environment into something alien and threatening. "Attention all personnel. Security breach in Sector 7. This is not a drill. Initiate lockdown protocols immediately." Rayburn's hand moved to his sidearm. "Sector 7 is the northeast perimeter, adjacent to the armory." Sarah was already moving, securing the Barrett in its case and retrieving her Beretta. "They're coming for me. Or for what you know," Rayburn said grimly. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out, completely plunging the armory into darkness. Emergency generators kicked in seconds later, but the main lighting remained offline. Only the red emergency lights continued to pulse, creating disorienting shadows that seem to move with malevolent purpose. "They've cut the power to bypass the security systems," Sarah observed, already calculating angles of approach and defensive positions. "Standard Ghost Division infiltration tactic." "Which means they have inside knowledge," Rayburn concluded. "We need to move. Now." The sound of gunfire erupted from somewhere outside the armory, short controlled bursts followed by the deeper boom of shotguns. Base security engaging the intruders. "Too late," Sarah said, her voice deadly calm. "They're already inside." She moved to the armory door, checking the corridor beyond. Clear for the moment, but the sounds of combat were growing closer. Whoever had breached the perimeter was fighting their way toward the armory. Toward her. "We need to reach the command center," Rayburn urged. "I have a QRF standing by." Sarah shook her head. "They'll expect that. We need to—" The armory door at the far end of the corridor burst open. A figure in tactical gear entered, weapon raised and sweeping. In the pulsing red light, Sarah could make out no features, only the silhouette of an operator moving with professional precision. Without hesitation, she raised her Beretta and fired twice. The first round struck the intruder's chest, staggering him, but not penetrating his body armor. The second found the gap between helmet and vest, dropping him instantly. "Move!" Sarah commanded, pushing Rayburn toward the emergency exit. Years of command authority fell away as the operational dynamics shifted. She was no longer a specialist under his command, but an elite operative protecting a high-value asset. They had taken 3 steps when another figure appeared at the corridor intersection ahead. Taller, leaner, moving with the liquid grace of a predator. In his hand, a silenced pistol that Sarah recognized immediately. Custom Makarov Modified Trigger Group Extended Barrel. The Jackal's signature weapon. For a fraction of a second, their eyes met across the distance. Recognition flashed between them. Hunter and hunted, predator and prey, each acknowledging the other's lethal capability. The Jackal fired first, the silenced round hissing through the space where Sarah's head had been a millisecond earlier. Her training took over body moving with the autonomic precision of thousands of hours of drills. She shoved Rayburn down and to the left, simultaneously dropping to one knee and returning fire. 3 rounds, center mass. The Jackal twisted with inhuman speed, the bullets striking his armored vest, but failing to penetrate. His countershot caught the light as it passed inches from Sarah's ear. In the confined space of the corridor, with a VIP to protect and limited ammunition, Sarah knew she was at a disadvantage. The Jackal was equipped for this specific encounter. She was not. "Secondary exit," she hissed to Rayburn, indicating a maintenance access panel to their right. "Go, I'll cover." "Not without you," Rayburn replied, drawing his own sidearm, a .45 caliber Colt that looked like it had seen service since Vietnam. The Jackal advanced, firing methodically, each shot perfectly placed to limit their movement options. Sarah recognized the tactic, herding them toward a predetermined kill zone where additional operators would be waiting. As the Jackal reached the midpoint of the corridor, Sarah made her decision. On her belt was a small pouch containing maintenance tools, including a ballpoint pen specifically designed for adjusting the tension on rifle triggers. In one fluid motion, she drew the pen-calculated trajectory and force, and threw it with the precision that had made her legend. The improvised projectile covered the 20 feet between them in less than a second, striking the Jackal directly in the exposed throat above his tactical vest. The impact wasn't lethal, but it was precisely targeted to impact the vagus nerve, causing immediate pain and temporary paralysis of the vocal cords. The Jackal staggered, his next shot going wide as his coordination momentarily failed. That moment was all Sarah needed. She surged forward, covering the distance between them with 3 long strides. The jackal recovered quickly, bringing his weapon to bear, but Sarah was already inside his firing arc. She struck upward, with the heel of her palm driving his chin back with enough force to momentarily stun him. The jackal countered with practiced efficiency, a knife appearing in his left hand, as if conjured from thin air. The blade slashed toward Sarah's abdomen in a disemboweling strike that would have killed a lesser opponent. But Sarah Mitchell hadn't survived 347 elimination operations by being predictable. Instead of retreating from the blade, she stepped into it, trapping the jackal's wrist against her body while simultaneously driving her knee into his solar plexus. The impact forced air from his lungs, creating a momentary opening in his defense. Sarah exploited the advantage with ruthless efficiency. Her right hand found the jackal's throat, fingers digging into the pressure points on either side of his windpipe with surgical precision. Her left hand controlled his knife arm, preventing the blade from finding its target. For 3 heartbeats, they remained locked together in the deadly intimacy of close-quarters combat. The jackal's eyes, cold gray, calculating, stared into Sarah's with professional assessment rather than fear or anger. Then something unexpected happened. The jackal smiled, a brief flash of recognition and respect from one apex predator to another. "Ghost," he whispered, the word barely audible. Before Sarah could respond, additional footsteps echoed from the corridor behind them. The jackal's backup had arrived. With a sudden twist, the jackal broke free of Sarah's grip, his elbow catching her temple with enough force to momentarily disorient her. Instead of pressing his advantage, the jackal retreated, disappearing through a service door with the fluid grace of someone who had studied the facility's layout extensively. Sarah regained her balance, turning to find Rayburn covering the corridor with his .45, preventing the approaching hostiles from advancing. "We need to move," she said, retrieving her dropped Beretta. "More will be coming." "That was him, wasn't it?" Rayburn asked as they retreated toward the maintenance tunnel. "The jackal," Sarah nodded, once her mind already calculating their escape route. "He's better than the reports suggested. Adaptive, controlled, under pressure." "He recognized you?" "Yes." Sarah paused at the tunnel entrance, checking for threats before ushering Rayburn inside. "Which means this isn't random. He came specifically for me." As they entered the narrow maintenance tunnel, the sounds of gunfire intensified behind them. Base security was engaging the intruders in force now, but Sarah knew it was a diversion. The jackal had found his target, her, and the failed attempt wouldn't deter him. He would regroup, reassess, and try again. The hunt had only just begun. CIA agent Richard Carter arrived at the scene 20 minutes later, after base security had secured the armory and surrounding areas. The intruders had retreated as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving behind 2 dead operators and a host of unanswered questions. 3 points of simultaneous breach, reported the security commander. Coordinated EMP to disable perimeter sensors, followed by precision strikes on communications and power distribution. These weren't amateurs. Carter examined the body of the operator Sarah had killed. No identification, no distinguishing marks, no standard military or intelligence agency equipment. The tactical gear was high-end but untraceable, the kind used by contractors and non-official operatives. "Where's General Rayburn?" Carter asked, noting the general's absence from the command post. "Unknown, sir. He was last seen heading toward the armory shortly before the breach." Carter felt a cold certainty settling in his gut. This wasn't a random attack or a test of base security. It was a targeted extraction or elimination operation, and either Rayburn or something in the armory had been the objective. His phone vibrated with an encrypted message. The text was brief but confirmed his suspicions. "Ghost compromised. Meet at alternate site Alpha. Bring ballistics. The message was signed with Rayburn's personal authentication code. Carter looked around the armory, taking in the precision rifles locked in their racks, the maintenance equipment, the technical manuals. Everything appeared normal, except for one detail: a weapons technician's station that had been hastily abandoned. The Barrett M82 case was still there, but the maintenance log beside it caught his attention. The handwriting was precise, methodical, each entry detailing work performed with a level of technical knowledge that went beyond standard armory procedure. Carter had seen documentation like this before in after-action reports from special operations units. The thoroughness, the attention to detail, the specific terminology, these weren't the habits of a regular technician. He checked the name on the duty roster: Specialist Sarah Mitchell. A quick search on his secure tablet brought up her personnel file. Everything appeared in order: exemplary service record, appropriate training certifications, standard career progression. Too standard, perhaps. The kind of background that would withstand casual scrutiny, but might unravel under forensic examination. Carter's instincts, honed through 15 years in intelligence work, were screaming. Mitchell wasn't who her file claimed she was, and if Rayburn's message was accurate, she was the Ghost, the legendary sniper whose exploits had become myth in intelligence circles. As Carter prepared to leave for the rendezvous point, he noticed something small on the floor beneath Mitchell's workbench: a silver object partially hidden in shadow. He retrieved it carefully, turning it over in his hand. A medal unlike any military decoration he had ever seen. No official markings, no service branch insignia. Just a number etched with precision: 347, and a crosshair symbol with a single star at its center. The final confirmation of what he had suspected. Sarah Mitchell, unassuming weapons technician, was actually the deadliest American operative ever to look through a scope. And now she was on the run with General Rayburn, pursued by the Jackal. The real question was, why now after 12 years of hiding? What did the Ghost know that was worth killing for? After all this time, Carter secured the medal in his pocket and headed for the rendezvous point, knowing that the answers he sought would reshape his understanding of American covert operations, and perhaps determine whether any of them would survive the next 48 hours. The fluorescent lights of Interrogation Room 3 cast harsh shadows across Sarah Mitchell's face. She sat motionless at the metal table, hands resting palm down on the cold surface, expression betraying nothing. Outside Fort Garrison's perimeter, dawn was breaking, painting the Texas sky in shades of crimson and gold, colors that reminded her too much of other dawns in other countries viewed through rifle scopes moments before taking the shot. Across from her, General Thomas Rayburn and CIA agent Richard Carter studied her with the careful assessment of men accustomed to evaluating threats. The silence stretched between them, a tactical pause designed to create discomfort. Sarah recognized the technique. She had used it herself during operations in places that didn't exist on official maps. Specialist Sarah Mitchell, Carter finally said, placing a folder on the table with deliberate precision. 38 years old. Transfer to Fort Garrison 3 years ago from logistics support at Fort Benning. Exemplary service record. No disciplinary issues. He paused, his fingers tapping the closed folder. A perfect service history. Almost too perfect. Dora remained silent, her breathing measured and controlled. But then, there's this. Carter placed the silver medal on the table between them, the damning evidence she had dropped during the chaos in the armory. 347 confirmed eliminations, the operational record of the Ghost, a sniper whose existence the United States government has never officially acknowledged. Sarah's eyes flickered briefly to Rayburn, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Permission granted. Some truths could now be spoken. I know who you are, Mitchell. Or should I call you Ghost? Carter continued, leaning forward. What I don't know is why the jackal has decided to hunt you now, after 12 years of silence. Sarah's voice, when she finally spoke, carried none of the deferential tone of Specialist Mitchell. This was the voice of an operator, calm, precise, commanding. Because I'm the one who got away, she said. Baghdad, 1997. The only target he ever failed to eliminate himself. The only witness to his true identity. She met Carter's gaze with cold precision. And I'm the only one who knows what he's really after. Carter exchanged a glance with Rayburn before continuing. We've been tracking the jackal for nearly a decade. 3 Ghost Division operatives assassinated in the past year alone. Johnson in Ankara, Petrovich in Berlin, Chen in Singapore. All with the same signature. Custom 7.62mm rounds with copper tungsten cores designed to defeat specialized body armor. They were bait, Sarah said flatly. He was drawing me out. Why you specifically? Rayburn asked. Sarah's mind drifted back to that day in Baghdad, 1997. The wind had been light, but variable 5 to 7 knots from the northwest. Temperature 103 degrees, humidity 11%, barometric pressure 29.87 inches of mercury. All factors calculated and compensated for as she lay motionless on the rooftop of an abandoned hotel, the Barrett M82A1, an extension of her body after 3 days in position. The target, a former Soviet operative turned international assassin known only as the Jackal, had proven elusive for years. Intelligence had finally placed him at a meeting with Iraqi weapons dealers, and Sarah had been tasked with his elimination. The shot was complex, but well within her capabilities, 387 meters with moderate wind variance and significant heat mirage. Through her scope, she watched as the jackal emerged onto the balcony of the target building. His features were unremarkable, the kind of face that could blend into any crowd. But his movements betrayed his training and lethal capability. Sarah regulated her breathing, her finger finding the familiar pressure point on the trigger. Then the unexpected. A child appeared on the balcony running to the jackal with the uninhibited joy of youth. The jackal's expression transformed, softening, as he lifted the boy into his arms. For a fraction of a second, Sarah hesitated, the crosshairs centered on the target's head, but her finger easing pressure on the trigger. That momentary humanity cost her the perfect shot. The jackal sensed something, perhaps the glint of her scope, perhaps simply the instinct that had kept him alive through decades of wet work. He moved suddenly, the bullet missing him by centimeters, as he dropped to the floor, shielding the child with his body. Their eyes had met across the distance, Sarah's through her scope. The jackal's unaided but somehow knowing exactly where she was positioned. An impossible recognition, a connection forged in the moment when one apex predator acknowledges another. She had failed. For the first and only time in her operational history, the ghost had missed. Because I know his weakness, Sarah said, returning to the present, and because I saw his face, not the one he shows the world, but who he really is. Carter leaned forward, his expression intense. And what is his weakness? Sarah met his gaze. He has a son, or had one. The boy would be about 17 now. Rayburn's expression remained impassive, but something shifted in his eyes, a recalculation of variables, a reassessment of the operational landscape. That information isn't in any intelligence file, Carter said, suspicion evident in his tone. Because I never reported it, Sarah replied. Official record states mechanical failure of the rifle. The truth is, I hesitated. The jackal was with a child, his child. I couldn't take the shot without risking the boy. You compromised a high-priority elimination because of a child. Carter's tone carried a note of disbelief. Sarah's eyes hardened. I made a tactical decision based on operational parameters. Collateral damage wasn't authorized. She made the right call, Rayburn interjected, surprising both Sarah and Carter. Ghost Division operated under strict rules of engagement. No collateral casualties, especially children. Mitchell followed protocol. Carter absorbed this information, his expression thoughtful. So, the Jackal knows you saw his vulnerability. That's why he's hunting you specifically. That's part of it, Sarah agreed. But there's more. After Baghdad, I was debriefed by Colonel Harmon. We discussed certain inconsistencies in the intelligence that led to the operation. Information that suggested the Jackal might have been working as a contract asset for Western agencies during certain periods. That's impossible, Carter said immediately. The Jackal has been on every intelligence agency's elimination list since the fall of the Soviet Union. Officially, Sarah countered. Unofficially, there were operations during the transition period after the Cold War that required specialized contractors with certain skill sets and deniability. Rayburn's weathered face revealed nothing, but his silence was confirmation enough. You believe the Jackal was a CIA asset? Carter asked incredulously. I believe there's a reason his file contains so many contradictions, Sarah replied. And I believe that's why he's hunting Ghost Division operatives now. We know too much about operations that certain people would prefer to keep buried. The tension in the room crystallized around this revelation. If Sarah was right, the Jackal's appearance wasn't just a threat to base security or even to her personally. It represented a potential intelligence catastrophe that could compromise decades of covert operations. Before Carter could respond, the door to the interrogation room opened. Major Wilson Rayburn's aide entered with an urgency that immediately commanded attention. Sir, we have a situation, he reported, his expression grim. Sergeant Davis, the designated marksman for tomorrow's demonstration, was found dead in his quarters 30 minutes ago. Single shot to the head, professional execution. The implications hit all of them simultaneously. The Secretary of Defense was arriving in less than 24 hours for a high-profile demonstration that now had no sniper to execute it. The Jackal? Carter asked. Wilson shook his head. Unlikely, sir. Base security has been at maximum alert since last night's breach. No unauthorized personnel could have entered the barracks. Then we have another problem, Rayburn said grimly. An infiltrator already inside the base. Sarah's mind was already calculating possibilities, assessing threats, and formulating countermeasures. The demonstration is the perfect opportunity for an assassination attempt. High-value targets in predictable positions, security focused outward rather than inward. Rayburn turned to her, his expression unreadable. Which is why we need a new marksman for the demonstration. One with the skills to not only perform, but to identify and neutralize any potential threat. The room fell silent, as the implication of his words became clear. You want me to do it, Sarah stated, not a question, but a recognition of the inevitable. You're the best qualified person on this base, Rayburn confirmed, possibly in the entire U.S. military. Sarah's jaw tightened. Taking that role would permanently compromise my cover identity. Everyone would know. Your cover is already compromised, Carter pointed out. The Jackal found you. Others will too eventually. This isn't just about the demonstration, Rayburn added. We have reason to believe the Jackal is planning something significant during the Secretary's visit. Intelligence chatter indicates a major operation targeting multiple high-ranking officials simultaneously. The weight of the situation settled over Sarah like a physical burden. For 12 years, she had lived in the shadows, escaping the moral complexity of her former life. Now circumstances were conspiring to drag her back into precisely the role she had fought to leave behind. "There's something else you need to know," Carter said, his voice lowered. "We believe there's a mole within Fort Garrison, someone helping the Jackal target Ghost Division operatives." "Based on what evidence?" Sarah asked sharply. "The infiltration last night was too precise, too informed. The attackers knew exactly where to breach, which systems to disable, and most critically, they knew you were here. That information is compartmentalized at the highest levels." Rayburn nodded in agreement. "Only 7 people on this base had access to the full personnel files that might have flagged your background. One of them is helping the Jackal." Sarah absorbed this new dimension to the threat. Not only was she being hunted by one of the world's deadliest assassins, but someone within the chain of command was facilitating the hunt. The sanctuary she had found at Fort Garrison had become a trap. "If I do this," she said finally, "I need something in return." "Name it," Rayburn responded. "Complete access to all Ghost Division operational files from 1995 to 1998, particularly anything connected to Baghdad and the Jackal. And I want Colonel Harmon's personal files. I need to understand what he knew that got him killed." Carter started visibly. Harmon's death was ruled a heart attack. Sarah's expression remained cold. Harmon ran 5 miles every morning until the day he died. He had the cardiovascular system of a man 20 years younger. It wasn't a heart attack. It was the first Ghost Division elimination. We just didn't recognize it then. Rayburn studied her for a long moment before nodding. "Granted, Wilson will provide everything we have within the hour." As if summoned by his name, Major Wilson re-entered the room. "Sir, the Barrett M82 has been secured in the Armory Ready Room for inspection. Preliminary checks indicate it's in optimal condition." "Specialist Mitchell will need access to it immediately," Rayburn ordered. "She'll be handling the demonstration tomorrow." Wilson's eyes widened slightly as he glanced at Sarah, reassessing her in light of this new information. "Yes, sir. I'll escort her personally." "One more thing," Sarah said, rising from her chair. "The Jackal won't be working alone. He'll have positioned at least 1 spotter, possibly more. I need full surveillance records of everyone who's entered the base in the past week." "Already compiling that data," Carter assured her. "We'll have it for you within the hour." As Sarah moved toward the door, Rayburn called after her. "Mitchell? Ghost. Are you certain you're ready for this? It's been 12 years. Sarah turned her expression, revealing nothing. "Some skills don't fade, General. They just wait for the right moment to re-emerge." The Ghost Division had been conceived in the twilight years of the Cold War, when the traditional boundaries between nations and ideologies were blurring into something more complex and dangerous. President Reagan, recognizing that conventional military assets lacked the precision and deniability required for certain operations, authorized the formation of a unit that officially didn't exist. Drawn from the elite of America's Special Operations community, Ghost Division operatives underwent training that pushed the limits of human capability. Their specialties varied. Some were infiltration experts, others demolitions, wizards, or electronic warfare specialists, but all shared one characteristic: they were the best at what they did. Sarah had been recruited at 20, fresh from basic training, where her marksmanship scores had broken records dating back to World War II. What her instructors hadn't known was that she'd been shooting since she could walk, raised by a father who had been a Vietnam-era sniper, with confirmed kills in the triple digits. Colonel Frank Harmon had recognized her potential immediately. At 65, Harmon had been a living legend in military circles, a veteran of Vietnam who had revolutionized sniper training and tactics. His weathered face and piercing blue eyes carried the wisdom of decades spent perfecting the art of precision elimination. "Most people think sniping is about the shot," he had told Sarah during their first training session at the classified facility deep in the Montana wilderness. They're wrong. It's about everything that happens before the shot. The planning, the positioning, the patience. The shot itself is almost an afterthought if you've done everything else correctly. Under Harmon's guidance, Sarah had learned to control not just her aim, but her entire body. How to regulate her breathing to maximize stability. How to slow her heart rate through meditation techniques adapted from Tibetan monks. How to remain motionless for 18 hours straight, ignoring cramps, insects, and weather, while maintaining perfect focus on a target zone. The technical training had been equally rigorous. Ballistics calculations that accounted for humidity, barometric pressure, temperature, wind speed, the Coriolis effect, and a dozen other variables that could influence a bullet's flight path across extreme distances. Weapons maintenance that went far beyond standard military specifications, with custom modifications to enhance accuracy and reliability in environments ranging from Arctic tundra to Middle Eastern desert. "You're not learning to be a killer," Harmon had told her when she successfully completed her first live elimination. "You're learning to be a guardian. Each shot you take will save American lives. Soldiers who won't face that enemy, civilians who won't be targeted. Never forget that distinction. You are not a tool for death, but an instrument of protection." That philosophy had sustained Sarah through her years with Ghost Division, through operations that took her to 37 countries and resulted in 347 confirmed eliminations. Each target had been vetted at the highest levels, each operation authorized only when no other option existed, each shot taken with the precision and moral clarity that Harmon had instilled in her. Until Baghdad. Until the diplomat. Until the lie that had shattered her faith in the system. Now, as Sarah inspected the Barrett M82 in the armory ready room, Harmon's words echoed in her mind. Was she still an instrument of protection? Or had she become exactly what she had feared? A tool to be wielded by forces beyond her control? Or understanding, Major Wilson stood nearby, watching her work with an expression that mixed curiosity and unease. "The rifle has been maintained according to factory specifications," he offered, "though I'm told you've already serviced it extensively." Sarah nodded absently, her focus on the weapon before her. The Barrett was in excellent condition, but she would verify every component personally before trusting it with her life, and the lives of those she would be protecting tomorrow. As she disassembled the massive rifle with practiced efficiency, Sarah considered Wilson carefully. As Rayburn's aide, he had access to the classified personnel files that might have revealed her true identity. He was one of the 7 potential moles Carter had mentioned. "You served in Afghanistan, Major?" she asked casually, noting the campaign ribbon on his uniform. "2 tours with the 10th Mountain Division," Wilson confirmed. "Though nothing as specialized as your background, apparently." Sarah continued her inspection, hands moving with unconscious precision. "The 10th saw heavy action around Kandahar in 2002. Were you part of Operation Mountain Lion?" A faint crease appeared between Wilson's brows, a tell that caught Sarah's attention immediately. "I was in a different sector during that period." The 10th Mountain Division had been entirely committed to Mountain Lion during that time frame. Either Wilson was falsifying his service record, or he was hiding something specific about that operation. Sarah made a mental note to investigate further, but gave no indication of her suspicion. Instead, she completed her inspection of the Barrett and began reassembling it with fluid efficiency. "The rifle is in excellent condition," she confirmed, "though I'll need to verify 0 at the range before tomorrow's demonstration." Wilson nodded. "I'll arrange range time for this afternoon. Anything else you require?" "Weather forecasts for tomorrow detailed." wind patterns across the demonstration area for the past week. And I'll need elevation data for all potential overwatch positions within 2 miles of the range. Wilson's eyebrows rose slightly. Planning for contingencies. Always, Sarah replied, her tone making it clear the conversation was over. As Wilson departed to fulfill her requests, Sarah turned her full attention back to the Barrett. The rifle felt familiar in her hands, awakening muscle memories that had lain dormant for 12 years. The weight, the balance, the precise tension of the trigger. All of it spoke to the part of her that had never truly forgotten what she was. What the ghost was. Her fingers moved automatically through the maintenance routine, checking each component with meticulous care. But as she examined the bolt carrier group, something caught her attention. A small anomaly in the metal, almost invisible, unless you knew exactly what to look for. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It was a microdot, a form of steganography used by intelligence agencies to hide messages in plain sight. She had seen similar techniques during her time with Ghost Division, but this was more sophisticated, utilizing technology that hadn't existed during her active service. Carefully, she extracted the bolt and moved to a microscope station in the corner of the ready room. Under magnification, the microdot revealed its secrets, a series of numbers and letters that would appear meaningless to most observers. But Sarah recognized the format immediately. It was a Ghost Division operational code, specifically the variant used for emergency communications when normal channels were compromised. The message was brief but clear. Artemis compromised. Jackal seeks full list. Trust no one. Sarah felt a cold weight settling in her stomach. Project Artemis hadn't just been the training program that created Ghost Division operatives. It was also the code name for the complete registry of all American deep cover assets in the Middle East and former Soviet territories. If the Jackal acquired that list, hundreds of American operatives would be exposed and eliminated. The message confirmed her worst fears. This wasn't about her personally, or even about Ghost Division specifically. The Jackal was after something far more valuable: the identities of every American covert operative in 2 of the world's most volatile regions. And someone at Fort Garrison was helping him get it. 3 hours later, Sarah sat in a secure briefing room with Rayburn and Carter, surrounded by files and digital displays showing surveillance footage from across the base. The message in the Barrett confirms what we suspected, Sarah explained. The Jackal isn't just targeting Ghost Division operatives. He's after the Project Artemis master list. That's impossible, Carter objected. The Artemis list is stored on isolated servers at Langley with no external network connections. It can't be accessed remotely. It's not about remote access, Rayburn said grimly. The list has a human component. 3 authorization officers, each with memorized fragments of the access protocols. Together, they can retrieve the complete list. Let me guess, Sarah said. 2 of those officers are already dead. Rayburn nodded. Admiral Jenkins died in a boating accident last month. General Harding suffered a stroke while visiting family in Oregon 2 weeks ago. And the third? Carter asked. The Secretary of Defense, Rayburn replied quietly. Who will be here tomorrow, standing in an exposed position during a weapons demonstration? The implications hung in the air between them. The Jackal had methodically eliminated 2 of the 3 authorization officers and was now targeting the third, using the demonstration as an opportunity to complete his mission. But why involve Ghost Division operatives at all? Carter wondered. Why not just eliminate the authorization officers directly? Because Ghost Division was the insurance policy, Sarah realized aloud. We were the only ones who knew about certain operations involving the Jackal in the 90s, operations that would explain his current actions. What operations? Carter demanded. Sarah turned to Rayburn, who looked suddenly older, the weight of decades of classified decisions evident in his expression. After the Soviet Union collapsed, there was a period of strategic uncertainty, Rayburn explained carefully. Certain Soviet special operations assets were left without handlers, without oversight. Some were recruited by Western intelligence agencies for operations that required complete deniability. "You're saying the Jackal worked for us?" Carter's disbelief was evident. "For a time," Rayburn confirmed, "until it became clear his loyalty was only to himself. Ghost Division was tasked with his elimination in 1997, but the operation failed. And now he's eliminating everyone who knows about his previous connection to American intelligence," Sarah concluded, "erasing his history while simultaneously acquiring information that will make him the most valuable assassin in the world. If he gets the Artemis list, he could auction off the identities of American operatives to the highest bidders." Carter said, the full horror of the situation becoming clear. It would be the single greatest intelligence catastrophe since Aldrich Ames. Sarah rose from her chair, moving to the surveillance displays. "We need to identify his inside man, the mole who's facilitating his operation here at Fort Garrison." She studied the footage showing personnel entering and leaving the base over the previous week. "The Jackal won't risk direct infiltration until absolutely necessary, which means his asset has been in place for some time. Someone with access, with authority. The 7 personnel with access to your file have all been with the base for at least 2 years, Carter noted, all with spotless records and extensive service histories. "Too spotless, perhaps," Sarah murmured, her attention caught by something on one of the displays. "Go back to Tuesday, 0930 hours. Carter rewound the footage, revealing Major Wilson entering the base through the north gate, returning from what appeared to be a routine trip off base. "Look at his left hand," Sarah instructed, "the way he taps his fingers against his leg as he passes the security checkpoint." Rayburn leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Morse code," Sarah nodded. 3 letters repeated twice, JAC. Carter's expression darkened. "That's not definitive proof." "No, but this might be," Sarah said, pulling a file from the stack before them. "Wilson's service record shows him with the 10th Mountain Division during Operation Mountain Lion in 2002, but he claimed to be in a different sector when I mentioned it. The 10th was entirely committed to that operation. There were no different sectors." "That could be a simple misremembrance," Carter argued. "Or deliberate misdirection," Sarah countered. "And there's more. Wilson supposedly transferred from Fort Drum in 2007, but there's a 3-month gap in his service record immediately before his arrival here. A gap that coincides with known Jackal operations in Turkey." Rayburn's expression had grown increasingly troubled as Sarah presented her evidence. "Wilson has been my aide for 4 years. He has access to nearly everything I do, including operational planning for tomorrow's demonstration. That's why the infiltration last night was so precise," Sarah concluded. "Wilson provided the layout, the security protocols, everything the Jackal's team needed to breach our defenses and locate me. If you're right, he's been playing a very long game," Carter said, still sounding skeptical but less dismissive. "The best deep cover assets always do," Sarah replied. "The question is, what do we do about it? If we confront him directly, we risk alerting the Jackal that we're on to his plan." Rayburn considered this challenge with the calculated precision of a battlefield commander. "We feed him controlled information. Let him think his plan is proceeding undetected while we prepare our countermeasures." "And what exactly are our countermeasures?" Carter asked. Sarah turned to the Barrett M82, which rested in its case nearby. "Tomorrow, I take my position as demonstrator. I execute the planned shots perfectly, giving no indication that we suspect anything. Meanwhile, you position counter-sniper teams at these locations. She indicated several points on the base map. When the Jackal makes his move, we'll be ready. You're using the Secretary of Defense as bait. Carter observed his tone, making clear his disapproval. No, Sarah corrected. I'm using myself as bait. The Jackal wants me as much as he wants the Secretary, maybe more. When he sees me in that position, exposed and seemingly vulnerable, he won't be able to resist the opportunity to eliminate both of us simultaneously. Rayburn nodded slowly, the strategy aligning with his own tactical assessment. It could work if we maintain absolute operational security. No one outside this room can know the true plan. Which means continuing to feed Wilson false information. Carter concluded, finally accepting the logic of Sarah's analysis. Precisely, Sarah confirmed. He expects me to be focused entirely on the demonstration concerned only with the technical aspects of the shots. That's exactly what we'll let him see. As they finalized the details of their counter-operation, Sarah felt a familiar clarity settling over her, the operational focus that had once defined her life. After 12 years of hiding, of pretending to be less than she was, the ghost was re-emerging, and this time she wouldn't miss. The afternoon shadows lengthened across the firing range as Sarah sighted the Barrett M82 on targets at various distances. Each shot was a symphony of precisely calculated variables: wind speed and direction, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, the minute expansion of the barrel as it heated with successive rounds. To the casual observer, she appeared to be simply verifying the rifle's zero and familiarizing herself with its particular characteristics. But Sarah was simultaneously mapping the entire operational environment, identifying potential sniper positions, calculating firing solutions for various scenarios, memorizing the terrain features that might provide concealment for hostile forces. Through the precision optics of the scope, she could see the demonstration area being prepared for tomorrow's event. Bleachers for the dignitaries' podium, for the Secretary's remarks. The cleared firing lanes extending to targets at 800, 200, and 500 meters. Every element created both vulnerabilities and opportunities, depending on one's perspective. From the corner of her eye, she noticed Major Wilson observing her from the range control tower. His posture was casual, but his attention was focused entirely on her performance, evaluating, reporting perhaps to his true handler. Sarah adjusted her scope slightly, centering the crosshairs on a target silhouette 200 meters distant. She regulated her breathing, feeling her heart rate slow as she settled into the familiar rhythm of the shot process. The trigger broke cleanly, the massive rifle recoiling against her shoulder as the .50 caliber round hurtled downrange at nearly 3 times the speed of sound. Through the scope, she watched the impact, dead center of the target's head exactly as intended. Another shot for the record. Another confirmation that her skills remained intact despite years of disuse. As she prepared for the next shot, Sarah allowed herself a moment of reflection on how quickly she had reacclimated to this role. It was as if the intervening years had been merely a pause, a temporary suspension of her true nature, rather than an escape from it. Colonel Harmon had once told her that certain people were born with gifts that came with corresponding responsibilities. Your eye, your hand, your ability to remain perfectly still for hours. These aren't just talents, Sarah. They're callings. And a calling isn't something you can ignore forever without losing part of yourself. Had she lost part of herself during these years of voluntary exile? Or had she merely been waiting for the moment when her true purpose would reassert itself? The philosophical question was interrupted by approaching footsteps. General Rayburn walked toward her firing position, his expression revealing nothing to potential observers. "Your performance is impressive," he said as he reached her. "The demonstration team is quite relieved to have someone of your caliber handling tomorrow's presentation." "Thank you, sir," Sarah replied, maintaining the formal manner appropriate for their assumed roles. "The rifle is performing within expected parameters." Rayburn nodded, then lowered his voice. "Carter has positioned additional security teams according to your recommendations. Surveillance is in place on Wilson. He made a call from his private cell phone 20 minutes ago, short duration, but encrypted. He's confirming final details with his handler," Sarah surmised. "The plan is proceeding." "There's something else you should know." Rayburn continued, his voice even quieter. "I've reviewed Harmon's personal files as you requested. There was a note about Baghdad 1997, something he never included in the official record." Sarah's attention sharpened. What was it? The intelligence that identified the Jackal's location came from an irregular source, a former KGB officer named Petrov, who had worked with the Jackal during the Soviet era. Harmon noted his suspicion that the intelligence might have been deliberately planted to expose Ghost Division's operational methods. "A trap," Sarah said, the pieces falling into place. "The Jackal wanted us to attempt the hit so he could identify who was hunting him." "And it worked," Rayburn confirmed. "He saw you, the best we had. He's been planning this endgame ever since." Sarah absorbed this revelation, recalculating the operational dynamics. "Then he'll expect me to be prepared tomorrow. He knows my capabilities, my methods." "Which is why we need to do something he won't expect," Rayburn agreed. "Something that goes against established Ghost Division protocols." Sarah considered the tactical problem from all angles, searching for the approach that would give them the necessary advantage. Then it came to her. A strategy so contrary to her training that it might be the only one the Jackal wouldn't anticipate. "I need to appear vulnerable," she said, the plan forming in her mind. "Not just physically exposed, but emotionally compromised. He needs to believe I'm rusty, uncertain, afraid of returning to active operations after 12 years. Rayburn's eyes narrowed as he followed her reasoning. "Psychological warfare. Make him overconfident." "Exactly. The Jackal is a predator. He responds to perceived weakness. If he believes I'm operating at less than peak capability, he'll take risks he might otherwise avoid." "How do we sell it?" Sarah glanced toward the range control tower where Wilson continued his observation. "I'll miss a shot. Not catastrophically, but enough to suggest deteriorated skills. Wilson will report it, feeding the Jackal's confidence in his plan." Rayburn nodded slowly. "Risky, but potentially effective. Just be certain you can recover when the moment comes." "I will," Sarah assured him, her voice carrying the quiet confidence that had once made her legend. "Some things you never forget." As Rayburn departed, Sarah returned her attention to the Barrett, making a deliberate show of adjusting the scope settings with apparent frustration. For her next shot, she intentionally failed to compensate for a subtle crosswind, resulting in a round that impacted several inches right of center mass on the target. She allowed her body language to convey disappointment and concern, knowing that Wilson would interpret it exactly as she intended, as evidence that the Ghost had lost her edge. That the legend was just that, a story that no longer matched reality. The deception complete, Sarah packed up the Barrett with methodical care. Tomorrow would bring the final confrontation, the moment when 12 years of hiding would end in either vindication or elimination. As she walked from the range, Sarah touched the Ghost Division medal in her pocket, feeling its weight and significance. 347 confirmed eliminations. Each one had been sanctioned, authorized, necessary. Each one had saved American lives. Tomorrow might add one more to that total, the most important one of all. Dawn broke over Fort Garrison with picture-perfect clarity, the Texas sky a flawless blue canvas unmarred by clouds. Weather conditions for the demonstration couldn't have been better. Temperature 68°, wind from the northwest at 3 to 5 knots, humidity 35%, barometric pressure rock steady at 30.12 inches of mercury. Perfect shooting conditions. Almost too perfect, Sarah thought, as she prepared in the armory-ready room. The Barrett M82 lay before her, cleaned and inspected, for the final time before deployment to the range. She had arrived 3 hours early, conducting her preparations in solitude, while the base gradually awakened around her. The door opened, admitting General Rayburn. His dress uniform bore the full complement of medals and ribbons earned through decades of service, his appearance calibrated to impress the visiting dignitaries. "The Secretary's motorcade just passed through the main gate," he reported. "Demonstration begins in 90 minutes. Sarah nodded, her movements precise as she completed her equipment check. "Counter-sniper teams in position." "Affirmative. Carter has 4 teams deployed at the locations you specified, plus additional security personnel interspersed among the audience. All communication is being routed through secure channels that Wilson doesn't have access to." "And our bait." Rayburn produced a small case from his pocket. "Authentic enough to fool anyone not directly involved with Project Artemis. If the Jackal's plan succeeds, he'll believe he's acquired the access protocols he needs. Until he attempts to use them," Sarah noted, "by which time he'll be in custody or eliminated," Rayburn confirmed. "Either way, the real Artemis list remains secure." Sarah rose from her workstation, the Barrett cased and ready for transport. "Then, it's time." As they moved toward the door, Rayburn paused. "Mitchell, Sarah, whatever happens today, I want you to know that Harmon would be proud. He always believed you were the best he ever trained." The unexpected personal comment caught Sarah off guard. For a moment, the professional distance she had maintained cracked slightly, revealing the human beneath the operator. "He was more than an instructor to me," she acknowledged quietly. "He was the father I needed after my own died. Everything I accomplished was because of his guidance." "And his faith in you," Rayburn added. "When you left Ghost Division, he defended your decision to everyone who questioned it, said you'd earned the right to choose your own path." Sarah absorbed this revelation, feeling an unexpected warmth in the knowledge that Harmon had supported her even after she walked away. "Thank you for telling me that, sir." "One more thing," Rayburn said, reaching into his pocket. "Harmon left this for you. Said you should have it when the time was right." He handed her a small object, another Ghost Division medal identical to her own, except for the number etched into its surface, 103, Harmon's confirmed eliminations from Vietnam. "He wanted you to remember that what we do has purpose," Rayburn explained, "that the burden we carry protects others from having to bear it themselves." Sarah closed her hand around the medal, feeling its weight. Not just the physical mass of metal, but the spiritual gravity of what it represented. Legacy, responsibility, purpose. "I understand," she said simply. Together they walked from the armory toward the demonstration range where destiny awaited, not just Sarah's personal reckoning with the Jackal, but a confrontation that would determine the fate of hundreds of American operatives around the world. The Ghost was back in the field, and this time she wouldn't miss. The demonstration range hummed with controlled activity as dignitaries and military personnel took their places in the viewing stands. The Secretary of Defense, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command, was engaged in conversation with base commanders near the podium. Sarah observed the scene from her designated position, the Barrett M82 set up on its bipod with perfect line of sight to the targets arrayed at 800, 200, and 500 meters. She wore the standard uniform of a weapons technician rather than specialized sniper gear, part of the deception that maintained her cover story while simultaneously making her appear more vulnerable than she actually was. Major Wilson moved efficiently through the crowd, coordinating last-minute details with the demonstration team. His manner was professional, betraying nothing of his true allegiance. Occasionally, his gaze would sweep across the surrounding terrain, casual to most observers, but to Sarah's trained eye clearly searching for confirmation that his real commander was in position. Through her peripheral vision, Sarah monitored the most likely sniper positions within range of the demonstration area. The Jackal would choose a location with multiple escape routes, good concealment, and a clear firing line to both her position and the Secretary's podium. Given the terrain and security patrols that narrowed the possibilities to 3 primary locations. Carter's counter-sniper teams were positioned to observe these areas, but Sarah knew the Jackal's skill set included detecting and avoiding such countermeasures. This wouldn't be resolved by conventional security methods. It would come down to a direct confrontation between 2 elite operators, each intimately familiar with the other's capabilities. The demonstration began with introductory remarks from General Rayburn, explaining the purpose and significance of the weapon systems being showcased. Sarah used this time to make final mental calculations incorporating the slight changes in wind conditions that had developed since dawn. Our first demonstration will showcase the Barrett M82A1 anti-material rifle, Rayburn announced, gesturing towards Sarah's position. Capable of engaging targets at extreme ranges with devastating effectiveness, this system represents the pinnacle of American precision engineering. Sarah felt the attention of the audience shift toward her. Dozens of eyes, evaluating, assessing. Among them, she knew, was Wilson, watching for any sign of weakness or uncertainty that he could report to the Jackal. She gave him exactly what he expected, allowing a subtle tension to show in her posture, a millisecond of hesitation as she settled behind the rifle. The performance was calibrated precisely, not obvious enough to raise suspicion among casual observers, but clear to anyone specifically looking for signs of compromised capability. Our technician will engage targets at progressively increasing ranges, Rayburn continued, beginning with the 800-meter target, proceeding to 200 meters, and concluding with a demonstration shot at 500 meters, a distance that pushes the boundaries of conventional marksmanship. Sarah positioned herself behind the Barrett, establishing her shooting position with practiced precision that belied her apparent nervousness. Through the scope, she acquired the first target, a steel silhouette at 800 meters a shot, well within her capabilities even on her worst day. As she prepared to fire, her awareness expanded to encompass the entire operational environment. The dignitaries in the viewing stands. Carter's security personnel positioned strategically throughout the area. The counter-sniper teams maintaining vigilance from concealed positions. And somewhere out there, watching, waiting, the Jackal. Patient, calculating, ready to strike when the moment was optimal. Sarah squeezed the trigger with controlled precision, feeling the familiar recoil as the Barrett sent its massive round downrange. Through the scope, she watched the impact, dead center of the target, creating a satisfying metallic clang that carried across the distance. Applause rippled through the audience, but Sarah was already transitioning to the second target at 1,200 meters. This shot required more precise calculation of environmental factors, especially the subtle crosswind that had developed in the past 15 minutes. As she prepared to fire, something caught her attention. A momentary flash of light from a ridge approximately 1,700 meters to the northwest. Not the reflection from standard optics, but the distinctive signature of a specialized scope using multiple lens elements to reduce glare. The Jackal was in position. Sarah maintained her composure, giving no indication that she had spotted him. Instead, she fired her second shot again, striking the target with perfect accuracy. More applause, more appreciative murmurs from the dignitaries. For the final demonstration, Rayburn announced. Our technician will engage a target at 1,500 meters, a distance that represents the effective maximum range of this weapon system under field conditions. Sarah shifted her position slightly, aligning the Barrett for the third shot, while simultaneously calculating a fourth that hadn't been announced, the shot that might be required to save the secretary's life and end the Jackal's threat once and for all. The target at 1,500 meters was smaller than the previous two, a partial silhouette designed to represent a minimally exposed enemy combatant. Hitting it would require perfect execution under any circumstances. Doing so while simultaneously preparing for a counter-sniper engagement elevated the challenge to a level few shooters in the world could manage. Sarah regulated her breathing, feeling her heart rate slow as she entered the zone of perfect concentration that had once been her natural state. The scope's crosshairs settled on the distant target rock steady, despite the 16-power magnification that would reveal even the slightest tremor. In that moment of perfect focus, Sarah suddenly understood the Jackal's plan with crystal clarity. He wasn't targeting the secretary directly. That would be expected, planned for. Instead, he would eliminate Sarah first, creating chaos and confusion that would provide the opportunity for Wilson to approach the secretary with the emergency evacuation plan, gaining the momentary privacy needed to acquire the Artemis access protocols. The realization came with absolute certainty. The Jackal was aiming at her, not the secretary. And he would take his shot the moment she fired her final demonstration round using the Barrett's report to mask his own. In the space between heartbeats, Sarah made her decision. She would fire at the 1,500-meter target as planned, but in the microsecond after the Barrett's recoil, she would execute a technique that violated every principle of conventional shooting. She would transition immediately to a fourth shot, using the recoil momentum to swing the barrel toward the Jackal's position and fire without re-establishing her shooting platform. It was a technique so unorthodox, so contrary to established doctrine, that no conventional sniper would attempt it. But Sarah wasn't conventional. She was the ghost. She fired the third shot, striking the 1,500-meter target with perfect precision. As the audience erupted in applause, Sarah's body was already in motion, using the Barrett's recoil energy to pivot the massive rifle toward the northwestern ridge. Through instinct more than conscious calculation, she acquired the Jackal's position in her scope, identifying the distinctive outline of a marksman in a concealed firing position. The crosshairs centered on his scope, the most exposed part of an otherwise perfectly camouflaged sniper. In that frozen moment, Sarah knew the Jackal was looking directly at her through his own optics. Two apex predators, eye locked across 700 meters of open terrain, each with the other in their sights. She fired. The Barrett's massive report echoed across the demonstration range, the sound still reverberating as Sarah observed the impact through her scope. The round struck exactly where she had aimed, directly into the Jackal's scope, the bullet continuing through the optical system into whatever lay behind it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the camouflaged form on the ridge slumped forward, the signature of a direct hit. Before anyone in the audience could process what had happened, before they could even realize that Sarah had fired an unscheduled fourth shot, alarms began blaring across the base. Security breach. All personnel implement lockdown protocols. The secretary's security detail immediately moved to surround him, creating a protective formation as they ushered him toward the armored vehicles standing by. General Rayburn was already moving toward Sarah's position, his expression a mixture of concern and grim satisfaction. "You saw him," Rayburn said as he reached her. "Not a question, a confirmation." "Northwestern Ridge 700 meters," Sarah replied, already breaking down the Barrett with practiced efficiency. "Direct hit, but we need confirmation." Carter's team is already moving to the location, Rayburn assured her. What about Wilson? Sarah scanned the demonstration area, locating Wilson among the security personnel surrounding the secretary. He's trying to maintain his cover, waiting to see if the jackal succeeded. Should we take him now? Sarah considered the tactical situation, weighing options and potential outcomes. No, we need to confirm the jackal's status first. If he's still operational, Wilson remains our link to him. As they spoke, Sarah's radio crackled with Carter's voice. Ghost, this is Watchman. Target location secured. We have a situation. You need to see this yourself. Sarah and Rayburn exchanged glances, both recognizing the unusual tension in Carter's voice. On our way, Sarah responded, securing the Barrett in its case before they moved toward the vehicles. Whatever Carter had found at the jackal's position, it wasn't what they had expected. The endgame was still unfolding, and Sarah sensed that the most dangerous phase of the operation was yet to come. The military convoy raced across the rugged terrain of Fort Garrison's northern perimeter, dust billowing behind the armored vehicles as they climbed toward the ridge where the jackal had established his firing position. In the lead Humvee, Sarah Mitchell checked her sidearm with methodical precision, her mind replaying the impossible shot she had just taken. 1,700 meters. Crosswind at 7 knots. Firing on the recoil impulse rather than from a stable position. By every standard of conventional marksmanship, it shouldn't have been possible. Yet something deeper than conscious calculation had guided her hands in that crucial moment. The muscle memory of thousands of similar shots, the instinctive understanding of ballistics that had once made her legend. The ghost had returned, if only for an instant. That shot, Rayburn said from the seat beside her, breaking the tense silence. In 30 years of special operations, I've never seen anything like it. Sarah didn't respond immediately, her attention focused on the ridge ahead, where Carter's team had secured the jackal's position. What had they found that warranted her personal presence? What situation was severe enough to warrant that edge of tension in Carter's voice? Colonel Harmon always said some shots come from beyond skill, she finally replied. When everything aligns, the shooter, the weapon, the environment, something happens that can't be explained by ballistics alone. Rayburn nodded, understanding the reference to the almost mystical connection that elite snipers sometimes developed with their craft. Harmon called it shooting from the soul, when the distinction between the shooter and the shot disappears completely. The convoy rounded a final bend in the access road, cresting the ridge where a perimeter of tactical vehicles and armed personnel had established a secure zone around the jackal's position. As their Humvee rolled to a stop, Sarah saw Carter standing near a camouflaged blind. The type of improvised shooting position that professional snipers constructed to match the surrounding terrain perfectly. Carter's expression was grim as they approached his posture, communicating a tension that immediately put Sarah on alert. "What did you find?" she asked without preamble. "See for yourself," Carter replied, gesturing toward the blind. Sarah approached cautiously, years of operational experience automatically scanning for potential threats or traps. The camouflaged position had been expertly constructed, invisible from more than 20 meters away, unless you knew exactly what to look for. The materials were military-grade but with subtle modifications that suggested European rather than American origin. Inside the blind lay a sniper rifle, a customized Dragunov SVD with specialized optics and an aftermarket trigger assembly. The scope was shattered, Sarah's .50 caliber round having passed directly through the optical system. Dark stains on the ground confirmed a hit, but something was very wrong. "There's no body," she observed, the tactical implications immediately clear. "No," Carter confirmed. But there's this. He handed her a small device, a remote trigger mechanism connected to the rifle, allowing it to be fired from a distance. The technology was sophisticated military-grade rather than improvised. It was a drone shot, Sarah concluded, examining the mechanism. The Jackal wasn't here physically. He set up a remotely operated position. Which means he's still active, Rayburn stated grimly, and now knows exactly how we're responding. Sarah's mind raced through the tactical implications. The drone rifle wasn't just a safety measure, it was a test, a way for the Jackal to evaluate her capabilities after 12 years away from operational status. Her impossible shot had confirmed what he suspected. The Ghost hadn't lost her edge. "We need to get back to the base immediately," she said, already moving toward the vehicles. This wasn't his primary play. It was reconnaissance. As they raced back toward Fort Garrison, Sarah noticed Carter studying a tablet displaying security camera feeds from across the base. His expression darkened as he swiped through the images. "Wilson is moving," he reported, headed toward the command bunker with the Secretary's security detail. Standard evacuation protocol. "That's where he'll make his move," Sarah confirmed. "The bunker provides the isolation he needs to access the Secretary while limiting potential interference." Rayburn keyed his secure radio. "All units, this is oversight. Security Chief Wilson is to be considered hostile. Detain immediately. Use extreme caution. Subject is highly trained and likely armed." The radio crackled with acknowledgments, but Sarah's instincts were screaming that something was still wrong. The Jackal had constructed an operation of remarkable complexity, with contingencies and deceptions layered upon each other. The remote rifle position was too obvious, too easily discovered. "It's another misdirection," she realized aloud. "Wilson isn't the primary threat. He's the distraction." Rayburn looked at her sharply. "Explain." "The Jackal wants us focused on Wilson while he executes the actual operation." Sarah said, the pieces falling into place in her mind. "Remember the intelligence. This isn't just about the Secretary. It's about the Artemis list, the complete registry of deep cover operatives." "Which requires all 3 authorization officers," Carter interjected. "2 are already dead, and the Secretary is the 3rd. "But it doesn't require the officers themselves," Sarah corrected. "Just their authorization codes. And those codes have to be stored somewhere secure, but accessible, in case of emergency." Rayburn's expression changed as understanding dawned. "The Pentagon contingency protocols. If an authorization officer is killed or compromised, their codes are accessible through the Military Strategic Command Network, but only from a secure military installation with Level 1 clearance." "Like the command bunker at Fort Garrison," Sarah concluded grimly. Carter was already checking his tablet, pulling up the bunker's security feeds. "The Secretary just entered the command center with his security detail and Wilson, who now has access to both the Secretary and the network terminals that could access the dead officer's authorization codes." Sarah said, the full scope of the threat now clear. The convoy accelerated, racing back toward the heart of Fort Garrison, where the most dangerous phase of the Jackal's operation was now unfolding. Sarah checked her weapon again, mentally calculating angles of approach, fields of fire, and tactical options for the confrontation to come. The Ghost was no longer just remembering who she had been. She was becoming it again. The command bunker at Fort Garrison was a reinforced concrete structure buried 20 meters beneath the administration building, designed to withstand everything from conventional bombing to electromagnetic pulse attacks. During the Cold War, it had served as a secondary command post for Strategic Air Command, its communications systems linked directly to the missile silos scattered across the American Midwest. Now it served as the secure evacuation point for visiting dignitaries in the event of a security breach. Exactly the scenario the Jackal had engineered with his remote rifle position. As Sarah Rayburn and Carter approached the bunker's external access point, they found two security personnel unconscious but alive, their weapons still holstered. "No blood?" Sarah observed, checking one guard's pulse. "Likely a fast-acting sedative delivered by aerosol, military grade." "Wilson's work," Carter surmised, clearing the way while maintaining the appearance of a normal security procedure. Sarah examined the entry keypad, noting signs of recent access. "They're already inside. How many entrances to the command center itself?" "Two," Rayburn replied. "Main entrance through the security checkpoint and an emergency evacuation tunnel that leads to the helicopter pad." "Which would be the Secretary's extraction point if the situation escalated," Sarah noted. "The Jackal will have that covered." Carter checked his tablet again, but the screen now showed only static. "They've cut the internal security feeds. We're going in blind." Sarah unholstered her sidearm, a standard-issue M9 Beretta that felt inadequate compared to the custom weapons she had once carried in Ghost Division. But equipment was secondary. What mattered now was the operator behind it. "I'll take point," she said, moving toward the bunker entrance. "Carter, secure the emergency tunnel. General, I need you to remain outside as our communications link. If we don't report back in 15 minutes, initiate full base lockdown and call in Task Force Delta." Rayburn looked as if he might object to being left behind, but operational logic prevailed over personal preference. He nodded once, accepting the tactical necessity. 15 minutes, he confirmed. "After that, I'm bringing in everything we've got." Sarah and Carter moved into the bunker, their movements synchronized with the practiced efficiency of elite operators. The main corridor stretched before them, emergency lighting casting crimson shadows across the concrete walls. At the first junction, they paused, listening for any sounds that might betray the presence of hostiles. "Take the emergency tunnel," Sarah whispered. "I'll approach through the main entrance. If Wilson has the Secretary, he'll expect an assault from the primary access point." Carter nodded, then hesitated. "The Jackal won't be far. He'll have anticipated our response." "I'm counting on it," Sarah replied, her voice carrying the cold certainty that had once made her Ghost Division's most effective operative. "This ends today, one way or another." They separated, each moving toward their assigned approach, with the silent efficiency that defined special operations personnel. Sarah advanced through the main corridor, her senses hyper-attuned to every shadow, every subtle change in the ambient sound of the bunker's environmental systems. 3 minutes into her approach, she detected it, the faint metallic click of a weapon being readied for action. The sound came from an alcove ahead, where the corridor bent toward the command center's main entrance. Without breaking stride, Sarah retrieved a small object from her pocket. Not a weapon, but a Ghost Division challenge coin that Colonel Harmon had given her years ago. With a precise flick of her wrist, she sent the coin skittering down the corridor past the alcove. The response was immediate. A figure emerged, weapon raised. Not Wilson, but a man Sarah had never seen before, dressed in the uniform of the Secretary's security detail, but moving with the unmistakable precision of a professional operator. Sarah was already in motion, closing the distance before the man could acquire her as a target. Her first strike disabled his shooting arm, the second targeted the vagus nerve at the base of his throat. A precision technique taught only to the most elite close-quarters combat specialists. The man collapsed without firing a shot, unconscious but alive. Sarah secured his weapon, a suppressed Glock 19 with custom tritium sights, and continued toward the command center, now certain that her assessment was correct. The Jackal had infiltrated the Secretary's security detail, positioning his own operators to ensure the success of the operation. The command center's main entrance was ahead, a reinforced door with biometric security that would normally be manned by at least 2 guards. Today, it stood ominously open, the security systems disabled. Sarah approached the threshold, using the reflection in a polished wall panel to survey the room beyond. The command center was a circular space dominated by a central conference table and surrounded by monitoring stations and communications equipment. At the table sat the Secretary of Defense, his expression calm, but his posture betraying tension. Standing behind him was Major Wilson, one hand resting casually on the Secretary's shoulder, while the other held a small device that Sarah recognized as a concealed weapon, likely a single-shot .22 caliber pistol designed to evade standard security screening. 4 other individuals were present. 2 from the Secretary's detail standing by the emergency exit, and 2 at computer terminals working with urgent concentration. All were imposters, Sarah suspected part of the Jackal's infiltration team. But the Jackal himself was nowhere to be seen. Sarah assessed the tactical situation with cold precision. 5 hostiles, 1 high-value package, multiple civilians at risk if a firefight erupted in the confined space. Standard operating procedure would call for a coordinated assault with flashbang grenades and multiple operators, but she had only herself and Carter, who was still securing the emergency tunnel. She needed to change the parameters of the engagement. Taking a deep breath, Sarah holstered her weapon and walked directly into the command center. Her posture relaxed, her expression revealing nothing. "Major Wilson," she said casually, "I see you've secured the Secretary. Well done." Wilson's expression flickered with momentary confusion before settling into calculated control. "Mitchell, I'm surprised to see you here. The evacuation protocol specifies essential personnel only." "General Rayburn sent me," Sarah replied, moving farther into the room with deliberate steps that positioned her between the Secretary and one of the computer terminals. "He was concerned about the remote rifle position we discovered. Apparently, the Jackal is more resourceful than we anticipated." Wilson's eyes narrowed slightly, his hand tightening almost imperceptibly on the concealed weapon. "The situation is under control. The Secretary will be evacuated as soon as we've verified the security of the extraction route." "But of course," Sarah agreed, her gaze sweeping across the other operatives in the room. None had overtly reacted to her presence, but she could sense the subtle tension that rippled through them, the almost imperceptible adjustments in posture and position that indicated readiness for action. "Though I'm curious," she continued, her tone conversational. "How did you know it was the Jackal's position before I mentioned it?" The question hung in the air between them, exposing the first thread of Wilson's deception. His eyes hardened, the pretense of normalcy evaporating as he recognized that Sarah had maneuvered him into revealing his hand. "You always were too perceptive for your own good." "Ghost." Wilson said, the familiar name jarring in this context. "I had hoped you'd remain safely in your armory playing at being normal." The Secretary looked between them, confusion evident on his face. "Major, what is the meaning of this? Who is Ghost?" "A relic of a bygone era," Wilson replied, his concealed weapon now fully visible as he pressed it against the Secretary's neck. "Someone who should have stayed buried in the past, where she belongs." Sarah remained perfectly still, her mind calculating distances, angles, reaction times. The 2 false security personnel by the emergency exit had drawn their weapons, while the operators at the computer terminals continued their work with increased urgency. "You're not getting the Artemis list, Wilson," she said calmly. "Even if you access the authorization codes, the system requires biometric confirmation from all 3 officers." Wilson smiled thinly. "A requirement that can be bypassed with the appropriate override protocols, which my associates are extracting from the military strategic network as we speak." "Under whose authority?" Sarah pressed, taking another seemingly casual step that improved her firing position. "The Jackal. Or are you operating independently now?" The jackal understands what you never did. Wilson replied, his voice hardening. Loyalty goes both ways. The government we served for decades abandoned its own operatives when they became inconvenient, left them to die in foreign prisons, disavowed their sacrifices, erased their contributions to history. The pieces clicked into place in Sarah's mind, not just the operational mechanics of the current threat, but the deeper motivation behind it. Archangel, she said quietly. Operation Archangel Kazakhstan, 1998. You were the ground controller for a deep cover team that was compromised when political priorities shifted. Wilson's expression confirmed her analysis. 14 operators left to die when their existence became diplomatically inconvenient. Good men and women who had served faithfully abandoned without hesitation when their mission conflicted with the administration's new foreign policy objectives. So this is revenge? Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer was more complex. Justice, Wilson corrected. The Artemis list contains the names of hundreds of operatives currently in the field, people who deserve to know that the same fate could await them at any moment. Once that list becomes public, the system will be forced to change. No more disposable assets. No more convenient memory holes when operations become politically problematic. You're talking about exposing hundreds of American operatives to assassination, Sarah countered. People with families with lives beyond their service. A necessary sacrifice to fix a broken system. Wilson insisted, his weapon still pressed against the secretary's neck. Sometimes you have to burn the field to restore it. Sarah recognized the dangerous conviction in Wilson's eyes, the absolute certainty that came from years of nursing a grievance until it transformed into a moral crusade. Reason wouldn't reach him. Only action would resolve this confrontation. Where is the jackal in all this? She asked, buying time as she assessed her options. I find it hard to believe he shares your idealistic motivation. Wilson's lips curved in a cold smile. The jackal understands professional necessity better than most. We have a mutually beneficial arrangement. He gets certain information that serves his interests. I get the exposure of the Artemis list and the accountability that will follow. You've been played, Wilson, Sarah said quietly. The jackal doesn't care about your crusade. Once he has the Artemis list, he'll eliminate you just as he's eliminated everyone else who knows about his past connections to American intelligence. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Wilson's face, brief but unmistakable. In that moment of hesitation, Sarah made her move. Her hand closed around a pen that lay on the conference table. An ordinary writing instrument to most observers, but in Sarah's hands a weapon as lethal as any knife. With precision born from thousands of hours of training, she flicked it toward one of the false security personnel by the emergency exit, striking him directly in the throat with enough force to collapse his windpipe. As he staggered backward, Sarah was already in motion, drawing her sidearm and firing in one fluid movement. The first round struck the second guard center mass, driving him back against the wall. The second round disabled one of the operators at the computer terminals, the bullet shattering his shoulder and rendering his shooting arm useless. Wilson reacted with the speed of a trained operative, dragging the secretary backward and using him as a human shield while bringing his weapon to bear on Sarah. But before he could fire, the emergency exit burst open, and Carter entered the room, his weapon already discharging with precision. The remaining computer operator fell a neat hole in his forehead, evidence of Carter's marksmanship. Wilson retreated further, his options rapidly diminishing as the tactical situation deteriorated. "It's over, Wilson," Sarah said, her weapon trained on him with rock-steady precision. "Release the secretary. It's not over until I say it's over." Wilson hissed, his weapon now pressed directly against the secretary's temple. "I still have leverage." What you have is a failing position, Sarah countered. Even if you kill the secretary, you won't get the Artemis list. The system has already been locked down on Rayburn's authority. Wilson's eyes darted around the room, seeking an escape route, a tactical advantage, anything that might salvage his operation. Finding none, his expression hardened into desperate resolve. Then perhaps a demonstration is needed, he said coldly. To show exactly how serious I am about— The back of Wilson's head exploded in a spray of crimson, his body collapsing forward onto the conference table. The secretary stumbled away, shock evident on his face, as he processed his sudden liberation. Sarah spun toward the source of the shot, her weapon raised and ready. Standing in the doorway of a maintenance access panel that hadn't been on any of the bunker schematics was a figure she recognized immediately. Average height, unremarkable features, eyes that held the cold calculation of a predator evaluating its prey. The Jackal. "Hello, Ghost," he said, his voice carrying a slight Eastern European accent. "It's been a long time." For 12 years, Sarah had imagined this moment, the confrontation with the one target she had failed to eliminate, the assassin whose existence represented her single professional failure. In her dreams, the scene had played out in countless variations, but none matched the reality now before her. The Jackal appeared exactly as she remembered him from Baghdad. A man of average build, with features so ordinary they seemed designed for anonymity. Only his eyes revealed his true nature. Pale gray, calculating, devoid of emotion, beyond a clinical assessment of the tactical environment. His weapon, a custom Makarov with an integrated suppressor, remained at his side, pointed at the floor, rather than at Sarah or Carter. A gesture of professional courtesy rather than surrender. "You've lost your asset," Sarah said calmly, her own weapon trained center mass on the Jackal's chest. "And your opportunity to access the Artemis list." The Jackal shrugged slightly. Major Wilson was becoming unpredictable. His ideological motivations made him vulnerable to emotional decisions, a liability rather than an asset. "So you eliminated him when he was no longer useful." Carter observed his position, carefully maintained to provide crossfire coverage with Sarah. "Just as your government would have done," the Jackal replied, without a hint of irony. "We are not so different in our methods, only in who signs our authorization orders." Sarah kept her weapon steady, her mind evaluating options, calculating the odds of various scenarios. The Jackal was a supremely dangerous adversary, perhaps the only person in the room whose skills truly matched her own. Any confrontation would be high risk with no guaranteed outcome. "Why are you here?" she asked directly. "You could have disappeared when the operation began to unravel." The Jackal's lips curved in the ghost of a smile. "Professional curiosity, perhaps. Or perhaps I wish to finally meet the legendary Ghost, face to face without the distance of a sniper's scope between us." "Baghdad." Sarah said, the single word carrying the weight of their shared history. "Yes, Baghdad," the Jackal acknowledged. "Where you made the one mistake that defines you still. You hesitated." "Because of the boy," Sarah responded. "Your son." Something flickered in the Jackal's cold eyes, a momentary humanity that Sarah had glimpsed 12 years ago through her scope. "Not my son, my brother's child, the only family I had left after your government's operations in Chechnya." The revelation struck Sarah with unexpected force. All these years, she had carried the weight of that hesitation, believing she had spared a father and child. The reality was different, but no less significant. She had spared the last connection to humanity that the Jackal possessed. "You've killed 3 Ghost Division operatives in the past year," she said, redirecting the conversation to the present threat. Johnson, Petrovich, Chen, all eliminated with the same signature method. Former colleagues, the jackal corrected, before your government decided our arrangement had reached its conclusion. Sarah's mind raced to process this new information. You were Ghost Division, an asset, not a member, the jackal clarified. During the chaos after the Soviet collapse, certain skills were valuable to both sides. I provided services for your Colonel Harmon on 4 operations between 1992 and 1997. Until Baghdad, Sarah surmised. Until Baghdad, the jackal agreed. When it became clear that I had outlived my usefulness and had become a potential liability. The operation wasn't to eliminate a terrorist target ghost. It was to eliminate me, a former asset who knew too much about American operations in regions where they officially had no presence. The weight of this revelation settled over Sarah like a physical burden. Her hesitation in Baghdad hadn't just been a professional failure. It had been an unconscious rejection of an order that on some level she had recognized as morally compromised. Harmon knew, she realized aloud. He knew the intelligence was manipulated. That's why he accepted my report of mechanical failure without question. Harmon was a man of principle in a system that often lacks them, the jackal acknowledged. His death was regrettable. You killed him, Sarah stated, not a question but a certainty. No, the jackal replied, surprising her. Wilson did on orders from individuals within your intelligence community who feared what Harmon might reveal if he ever decided that loyalty to his operatives outweighed loyalty to the system. Carter shifted his position slightly, his weapon never wavering from the jackal. Why should we believe anything you say? You're an assassin, a killer for hire. As is she, the jackal responded, nodding toward Sarah. The difference is merely in the authorization. Your ghost has eliminated 300 on the orders of men she has never met, for reasons she was rarely fully informed about. I have done the same, but without the comforting fiction of patriotic duty to absolve me of moral responsibility. The brutal truth of his assessment struck Sarah with unexpected force. She had always justified her actions through the framework Harmon had provided. That each elimination saved American lives, protected the innocent, served a greater good. But how many of those operations had been like Baghdad, based on manipulated intelligence serving political rather than security objectives? We are not the same, Sarah insisted, though with less conviction than she might have mustered hours earlier. No, the jackal agreed unexpectedly. You still believe in something beyond survival. That is your strength and your vulnerability. The tactical standoff continued, neither side willing to initiate the action that would inevitably result in bloodshed. In the background, the Secretary of Defense remained silent, wisely choosing not to insert himself into a confrontation between two lethal operators. What happens now? Sarah finally asked, cutting to the heart of the matter. You've lost your chance at the Artemis list. Wilson is dead. There's nothing left for you here except a confrontation you might not survive. The jackal considered this assessment with clinical detachment. There are always other opportunities, other vulnerabilities to exploit. The list was valuable, but not essential to my continued operations. Then why risk coming here personally? Carter demanded. Why not send another proxy, like the remote rifle position? As I said, the jackal replied, his gaze never leaving Sarah's. Professional curiosity, and perhaps a desire to deliver a message directly to the ghost. What message? Sarah asked, tension coiling in her muscles as she prepared for potential action. That the system you serve has betrayed you, just as it betrayed Wilson, just as it betrayed me, the jackal said, his voice taking on an unexpected intensity. That the men who give the orders are not worthy of the loyalty of those who execute them. That the true brotherhood exists not between operatives and their handlers, but between those of us who live in the shadows and understand its costs. The words resonated with uncomfortable clarity, touching the doubt that had led Sarah to walk away from Ghost Division 12 years ago. The suspicion that the system she served might be fundamentally compromised, not by enemy action, but by its own internal contradictions and moral failures. "Your nephew," Sarah said, suddenly changing the direction of the conversation. "The boy in Baghdad. Where is he now?" Something shifted in the jackal's expression, a softening so subtle it would have been imperceptible to anyone without Sarah's trained eye for human micro-expressions. "Safe," he replied, "beyond the reach of those who might use him to control me. He knows nothing of what I am or what I do." "You protected him from your world," Sarah observed, "gave him a normal life." "As much as possible," the jackal acknowledged. "Some burdens should not be inherited." In that moment of shared understanding, Sarah recognized the fundamental truth that united them despite their opposed positions. Both had seen the darkness at the heart of the systems they served. Both had tried in their own ways to maintain some core of humanity despite the dehumanizing nature of their profession. "I can't let you leave," she said, regret coloring her voice despite her professional resolve. "You know that." "And I cannot surrender," the jackal responded with equal candor, "which leaves us at an impasse with only one traditional resolution." The tension in the room crystallized around this acknowledgement that their confrontation could end only with one or both of them dead or severely wounded. It was the inexorable logic of their profession, the final mathematics of opposed operational objectives. But Sarah found herself hesitating just as she had in Baghdad, not from uncertainty or fear, but from a growing recognition that the cycle of elimination and counter-elimination served only to perpetuate the very system that had betrayed them both. "There is another way," she said quietly. The jackal raised an eyebrow, professional curiosity evident in his expression. "We both walk away," Sarah continued. "You from this operation, me from whatever role Rayburn and the Pentagon have planned for my reactivation. We both disappear, permanently, this time, with the understanding that any future contact between us will end traditionally." "An unusual proposal from someone with your record," the jackal observed. 347 confirmed eliminations suggests a certain commitment to traditional resolutions. 348 if we count Wilson, Sarah corrected grimly. "And each one authorized by a system I'm no longer certain deserves my loyalty." Carter looked at her sharply. "Mitchell, you can't seriously be considering letting him go. He's killed American operatives, threatened the Secretary of Defense, attempted to compromise the entire Artemis network. And we've killed his colleagues, betrayed our commitments, and manipulated intelligence to serve political objectives," Sarah countered. "At some point, the cycle has to break." The jackal studied her with renewed intensity, perhaps seeing for the first time not just the ghost of legend, but the woman who had walked away from that identity in search of something more grounded in genuine moral principle. "Your Colonel Harmon would be proud," he said finally. "He spoke of you often during our joint operations, said you were the only one who truly understood that our profession is not about death, but about choice, about when not to take the shot as much as when to take it." Sarah felt the weight of Harmon's legacy in that moment. Not just his technical instruction or tactical wisdom, but the moral framework he had tried to instill in her. The understanding that true strength came not from the ability to take life, but from the wisdom to know when such action served a genuine good. "What guarantee do I have that you won't continue eliminating American operatives?" she asked, practical concerns asserting themselves even as the possibility of a non-lethal resolution formed between them. The same guarantee you have that your government won't continue targeting former assets who know too much, the Jackal replied with brutal honesty. None. But I propose a mutual deterrence. I retain certain information about Ghost Division operations that would be damaging if released. You now know my nephew exists a vulnerability I've concealed from everyone else alive. Mutually assured destruction, Carter observed dryly. Mutual respect between professionals, the Jackal corrected, and perhaps recognition that we have served our purpose in a game where neither side truly deserves our sacrifice. Sarah considered the proposal with the calculated precision that had defined her operational career. The risks were substantial. Letting the Jackal walk away violated every protocol, every principle of her training. Yet, the potential benefit, breaking the cycle of retribution that had claimed too many lives already, offered something neither of them had found in their years of service, a path towards something like redemption. The Secretary remains unharmed, she stipulated, and you provide everything you have on Wilson's network. Any other moles? Any planned operations against American interests? Agreed, the Jackal said without hesitation. In exchange for your word that my nephew remains untouchable, by you or any agency you influence. Agreed, Sarah confirmed. Carter looked between them, disbelief evident in his expression. This is insanity. He's an international assassin with American blood on his hands. And I'm an American assassin with international blood on mine, Sarah replied quietly. The distinction matters less than I once believed. The standoff held for several more seconds, the outcome balanced on a knife's edge of mutual trust between two people trained never to trust anyone. Then, with deliberate slowness, the Jackal lowered his weapon completely. Your reputation is well earned, Ghost, he said, a hint of genuine respect in his voice. Few in our profession retain the capacity to see beyond the immediate tactical objective. Sarah lowered her own weapon, though she remained ready to raise it again at the first sign of deception. Survival sometimes requires adaptation. The Jackal nodded once, acknowledging the truth in her assessment. Then, with the fluid grace that characterized his movements, he extracted a small flash drive from his pocket and placed it on the conference table. Everything on Wilson's network, including 3 other embedded assets in American intelligence services, he said. Consider it a gesture of professional courtesy. Without another word, he turned and disappeared through the maintenance access panel from which he had emerged. Sarah made no move to follow, understanding that the resolution they had reached was as fragile as it was necessary. Carter immediately moved to secure the Secretary, escorting him away from Wilson's body and checking him for injuries. The older man seemed dazed but physically unharmed, the full impact of what he had witnessed still processing in his expression. You just let an international terrorist escape, Carter said to Sarah, his voice tight with controlled fury. Do you have any idea what the consequences will be? Sarah picked up the flash drive, weighing it in her palm like the moral calculation it represented. I made a choice based on the totality of circumstances. Sometimes the mission parameters change in the field. Rayburn will have your head for this, Carter warned. Perhaps, Sarah acknowledged, but I can live with that consequence more easily than the alternative. As Carter radioed Rayburn to report the Secretary's safety and request medical evacuation for the wounded, Sarah found herself reflecting on the strange symmetry of her career. It had begun with a shot not taken in Baghdad and now pivoted on another moment of restraint. A recognition that some victories came not from elimination, but from understanding. Colonel Harmon would indeed have been proud. The aftermath unfolded with the controlled chaos typical of high-level security incidents. Medical teams treated the wounded. Forensic units documented the scene. Intelligence analysts began processing the information on the Jackal's flash drive, which proved to be exactly what he had claimed. A comprehensive breakdown of Wilson's network and operations. Sarah stood apart from this activity. Her operational role concluded with the Secretary's safe evacuation to a secure facility outside Fort Garrison. She waited in a small conference room adjacent to the command bunker, anticipating the debriefing that would inevitably follow, and the consequences of her unorthodox decision. General Rayburn entered alone, his expression unreadable as he closed the door behind him. For a long moment, he simply studied her, perhaps seeing both the ghost he had once authorized and the woman who had walked away from that identity in search of something more. "The Secretary has been fully briefed on the situation," he said finally, "including your role in resolving it." "And the Jackal's escape?" Sarah asked directly. "An operational detail that may not appear in the official record," Rayburn replied, surprising her. "The Secretary believes that some aspects of this incident are best addressed with discretion rather than bureaucratic thoroughness." Sarah processed this unexpected development. He's covering it up. He's recognizing that the system sometimes requires flexibility to achieve its ultimate objectives, Rayburn corrected. The flash drive has already identified 2 additional moles within the Pentagon's intelligence division. That alone justifies certain accommodations regarding how the incident is documented. So I'm not facing court-martial for letting an international assassin walk free. Rayburn's weathered face creased in what might have been a smile. The official record will state that the Jackal was neutralized during the operation with operational details classified at the highest level. What actually happened in that room remains between those who were present. The pragmatic resolution was so thoroughly typical of how the intelligence community operated that Sarah found herself appreciating its elegant simplicity. The system protected itself, even when doing so required bending its own rules beyond recognition. "And what happens now?" she asked. "Do I return to my cover identity in the armory pretending none of this happened?" Rayburn shook his head. "That option no longer exists. Too many people saw the ghost in action today. Your skills have been reconfirmed in ways that make returning to anonymity impossible." Sarah had expected this assessment, but still felt the weight of its implications. The life she had built over 12 years, limited and constrained as it was, had provided a certain peace, a distance from the moral complexities of her former role. "The Secretary has authorized me to offer you a position," Rayburn continued. "Not as an operational asset, but as an instructor. The next generation of specialized operators needs the benefit of your experience, not just technical skills, but the judgment that comes from understanding the true cost of what we do." The offer caught Sarah by surprise. She had expected reactivation or dismissal, not a third path that acknowledged both her capabilities and her hard-earned wisdom. "Teaching?" she asked, turning the concept over in her mind. "Following in Harmon's footsteps. He always said you were his finest student," Rayburn confirmed, "the one who understood not just how to take the shot, but why it mattered. That perspective is increasingly rare and increasingly valuable." Sarah considered the proposal, weighing it against the alternatives. A return to operational status would mean re-entering the moral quagmire she had fought so hard to escape. Walking away entirely would mean abandoning the opportunity to influence how the next generation of operators approached their responsibilities. Teaching offered something different, a chance to honor Harmon's legacy by instilling in others the principles that had guided him. The understanding that technical proficiency without moral foundation created not guardians but merely efficient killers. "I'll need certain guarantees," she said finally. "Complete autonomy over the curriculum, no interference from political appointees, and veto authority over candidate selection. Rayburn nodded, unsurprised by her conditions, already approved by the secretary. He believes the program needs precisely the kind of independent oversight you're describing. Then I accept, Sarah said, feeling a weight lifting that she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. Not the burden of her past actions, those would always remain part of who she was, but the uncertainty about her future purpose. There's one more thing, Rayburn added, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew the Ghost Division medal she had dropped in the armory, the silver disc catching the light, as he placed it on the table between them. This belongs to you, not as a burden to carry, but as a reminder of what you've overcome. Sarah picked up the medal, feeling its familiar weight in her palm. 347 confirmed eliminations. Each one authorized, each one necessary according to the intelligence available at the time. The record of a different life, a different identity. Not a burden, she agreed. A responsibility. To ensure that those who follow understand what these numbers truly represent. As she pocketed the medal, Sarah felt a sense of completion. Not the closure of a chapter, but the integration of her past into a future that honored both who she had been and who she had become. The ghost would always be part of her identity, but no longer its totality. 6 months later, Sarah stood at the edge of a firing range in Virginia, watching as 8 candidates executed a complex shooting drill. The facility, officially designated as Advanced Marksmanship Training Center, but known informally as Ghost School, operated under her complete authority with a curriculum that balanced technical excellence with ethical responsibility. "Their mechanical skills are impressive," observed Carter, who had become an unexpected ally in establishing the program. "But they're still thinking like conventional snipers." Sarah nodded, noting the textbook-perfect but ultimately predictable approaches the candidates were taking. They're shooting with their training, not their instincts. That will change. The program was already producing results that had raised eyebrows throughout the special operations community. Sarah's unorthodox methods, incorporating ethical decision-making scenarios alongside technical marksmanship, initially met resistance from traditional instructors. But the performance metrics spoke for themselves, with her graduates demonstrating superior judgment in complex operational simulations. After the day's training concluded, Sarah walked alone to a small memorial garden at the edge of the facility, a quiet space dedicated to operators who had fallen in service. At its center stood a simple stone marker bearing no name, only a set of coordinates that meant something only to those who knew their significance. The location in Baghdad, where Colonel Harmon had once positioned her for the shot that changed everything. "You were right," she said quietly to the marker, a ritual she had established since taking on her new role. It was never about the shot itself, but about understanding the responsibility that comes with the power to take it or not. From her pocket, she withdrew the Ghost Division medal, its silver surface reflecting the late afternoon sunlight. Next to it, she placed Harmon's medal, the one Rayburn had given her bearing the number 103. Teacher and student linked by understanding that transcended the technical aspects of their profession. As she rose to leave, Sarah noticed a small envelope propped against the base of the marker, something that hadn't been there when she arrived. With cautious curiosity, she opened it to find a photograph of a young man in a university graduation gown, his features carrying a subtle but unmistakable resemblance to the jackal. On the back, written in precise handwriting, was a simple message: "Some debts can never be repaid, but they can be honored." He studies medicine, now healing rather than harming. Perhaps there is hope for both our legacies. Sarah studied the image, feeling the weight of the moment when she had hesitated in Baghdad. The decision that had allowed this young man to grow up with his uncle, to choose a path of healing rather than destruction. One shot not taken, one life preserved, rippling outward in ways she could never have anticipated. She returned the photograph to the envelope and slipped it into her pocket alongside the medals. 347 confirmed eliminations remained her operational legacy, but it was the shots not taken, the moments of restraint and judgment that defined who she had become. The ghost had evolved into something more complex, more human, and ultimately more valuable than the perfect weapon she had once been. A teacher, a guardian of institutional memory and ethical principle, a bridge between the shadowed past of special operations and a future that honored sacrifice without glorifying violence. As she walked back toward the training facility, Sarah felt a sense of purpose that had eluded her during her years in the armory. Colonel Harmon had believed that true strength came not from the ability to take life, but from the wisdom to know when such action served a genuine good. Now she would ensure that wisdom wasn't lost to the next generation. The ghost had found her redemption not in escaping her past, but in transforming it into something that might in some small way balance the scales of her lethal legacy. 347 confirmed eliminations, and one life saved that had made all the difference.